Right, there you go. The clock's ringing across the road there. So it's 4 o'clock, meeting time. Welcome everyone. Do we have any apologies to start off with? What have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 6, 7, 8. There's a couple away. Any apologies? No apologies? Okay. We'll just go around the table and identify everyone. Councillor Posselt, Councillor Lohberger, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Kitsos, Councillor Dutta, Alderman Bloomfield and Alderman Zuko, and I'm Councillor Harvey. So welcome again everyone. Where are we? Apologies, leave of absence. No, we don't have any. So acknowledgement of country. Look, I think I'm going to do this in relation to the agenda today. There's 3 things on the agenda that I feel a strong connection with regard to acknowledgements of country, and that's to do with fire. So for many tens of thousands of years, our Indigenous communities had this amazing relationship with fire and how they managed the land, and fire was their tool. It's how they protected themselves from wildfires, it's how they managed land to create areas for animals to graze, and various other food sources were connected to fire. And how we manage fire today is a far cry from how Indigenous communities managed fire, Lord Mayor. And I think this is a really important time in our history to re-establish that connection with fire. We'll never get to a point where we understand it like Indigenous cultures did, not just in Australia but across the whole world. So my acknowledgement today is about how Indigenous cultures worked with fire and how we need to understand how to work with fire into the future, manage fire and come up with solutions looking to Indigenous cultures as well as the science of fire, the understanding of fire. So there's 3 items on the agenda tonight. It's the Hobart Municipal Emergency Management Committee, insights from the Los Angeles fires of Hobart. Then we have a presentation around wildfire, house loss, hazard mapping, and the RACT Community Bushfire Resilience Project. So that's the acknowledgement for tonight, how we're connected to fire. And I acknowledge the Palawa people of Lutruwita who had this amazing relationship over tens of thousands of years. All right, let's keep moving. Any supplementary items? There are none. Conflicts of interest, anyone? No conflicts of interest. Any transfer of agenda items?
Yeah, Mr Chair, if we could possibly, on item 8.3, could we have 8.3 as 8.1 and just move everything back? I may have to go early, that's all.
All right, okay. Any objections to that? Okay, I'll put that to the committee. All those in favour of shifting that item forward, say aye. Those against, say no. Okay, we'll declare that carried. Item 8.3 will be heard before 8.1. And I'll just acknowledge the Deputy Lord Mayor has arrived. Item 6 is...
Chair, just wondering,
yeah.
Did we confirm the minutes, item 3?
Okay, no, I overlooked that. Okay, we'll go back to the minutes. Would somebody like to move the minutes? And you reckon they're correct? You do? All right. All those in favour of the minutes, say aye. Aye. Those against? Okay, declare that carried unanimously. We're down to item 6, which is special reports of committee, special committee reports, Place and Wellbeing Committee. Councillor Kitsos, would you like to move that item since it's your committee? Sure. Would you like to tell us anything?
No, I think it's all in the report.
Okay, any questions for Councillor Kitsos about her committee? No, there being none, we'll keep moving. City Transport Committee. Okay, we still need to vote, I've been reminded. Okay, all those in favour of accepting that report?
Aye. Aye.
Aye, those against? Carried. 6.2 is City Transport Committee. Can I have a mover for that? Anyone? Thank you, Deputy. Did anyone have any questions for the officers since our person's evacuated the room? He's on an emergency call? No? Okay, I'll move that item. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Those against? No? Carried. 6.3, City Economy Committee. Would someone like to move that?
I'll move that.
Thank you, Alderman Bloomfield. Any comments you'd like to make?
Mostly that it's settled down nicely at the moment. I'm looking forward to being able to repopulate our membership within the committee, but I think the expectation is that we'll probably look at doing that in the new term, mostly because we've had people who've sold premises and therefore moved on. We've had students who are members who have moved to other states and things like that. So as a result, we haven't been able to replace the membership. So so at the moment it's a little low, but I'm looking forward to that kind of coming back, because the value of the room has proven good feedback on many occasions to date.
Okay, so how many have you currently got on the committee?
We've got probably 3 or 4 at least left, but only 2 turned up last time, which was a bit sad, but there was some that were sick and things like that, so you kind of get that you're always going to have that up and down, but it's very hard when you've already got a small room to choose from. 1 or 2 people who are sick suddenly makes a big difference, but looking at going forwards, we wanted to basically change the way it's done so that we can get a stronger membership and better feedback.
Okay, well, good luck with recruitment. All right, we'll keep going.
Comment there?
Yeah, go on.
Chair? I actually went into town yesterday, into Hobart, and I noticed that the cafes and the pubs were absolutely pumping. They were just full of family groups celebrating Mother's Day, and it was really incredible to see on a Sunday.
Yep.
I was a little bit surprised to read the front of the paper today.
Yeah.
After seeing that yesterday.
And some of those photos, I don't know how they got those photos. They must have cleared the street. Could we all get out of the way, please, while we get a photo?
Well, they're probably in areas where there are no open businesses, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sorry, look, Mother's Day is the busiest day of the year. It's bigger than, it's bigger. It's the busiest day. Like I would go to the last 3. I went to Brisbane to run my mate's restaurant. Right, they did 500 covers yesterday. Couldn't get up there. This year 500 covers. They don't do 500 covers every Sunday.
I bet they knocked back a lot of walk-ins too. So
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying,
well,
we cannot gauge business in our city or anywhere around the country on Mother's Day or Father's Day.
Okay, well, it was a good day yesterday.
It was a good day. Well, what's it make Mother's Day every day?
All right.
I think, Chair, another person has a...
Yeah, thank you. I'm just making the observation, with regards to membership. For the first one, we have about 9 members and 7 were present in that transport committee. And then the other one was 6 members and 4 were present. And as the chair has said, for this 1 year, there's only 2 members. So I'm just wondering, when are we going to review this? Will it, this going to continue until the end of term and in the new term? Or should we now reconsider this committee system? That's all, And when are we going to do that?
Do you want to have a go? I have a go.
Well, the chair's already answered it in terms of the committee. What you're asking is a different question, though.
No, my question is linked to the facts. So I'm providing a context, and the context is this, that if you look at the numbers, what I'm seeing here, according to the chair's already answered, there are 2 members, and they'll be filled in the next term. That's my understanding.
Yes.
So that clarification I'm asking. And then is there a time? I think we were going to review this. That's what I'm asking. That's a new question.
Yeah,
but in that context.
That's what I was trying to understand. Yeah, so that we will be looking at the governance holistically, including the committee structure, but it was intended to be in the new term to do that.
All right. Yeah, that's what I'm asking for. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We're on to 7 reports. Tasmanian planning scheme, making it easier to develop medium density housing. So moved. That we hear the deputation or we hear the report. Who's talking to this? Karen.
Well, we don't have a presentation, but we are here and answer any questions anybody has.
Yep. Did you want to talk to us first? Do you want to say anything?
Jen knows more about it than me.
Yep.
Essentially, the state government is as part of as part of a suite of consultations coming out of the state government. This one is reviewing medium density and the different ways of dealing with that in a regulatory sense.
Yeah, and so this was a highly targeted consultation. So this went to local governments as well as state agencies It went to LGAT, the Institute of Architects, the HIA, Master Builders, the Property Council, Shelter, TAS Networks, TAS Water and Hydro. So this was, and all the local governments around Tasmania. So this is their first tranche of recommendations coming out of the Improving Residential Standards work. So for some of you who remember that huge body of work that we were doing, a lot of recommendations came out of that project in itself. I was on the working group, and this is the SBO's first attempt at wrangling everything that came out of that into some new planning controls. There was a lot there to digest, and I appreciate that the submission is quite long. I think it's important to note that this really was a discussion paper, and then this was us putting forward comments that the SPO will take on board, and we're expecting to have a lot more meetings with them in the weeks to come, months to come. We've put forward our recommendations, and we've tried to consider what were some of the really big factors for the City of Hobart, knowing that this is statewide planning policy. So you have to sort of keep in mind that other councils may have a different approach. So we tried to be balanced, and we tried to make sure we understood that in other jurisdictions, a new zone that sends a very clear message around medium density might be something that their council wishes to overlay and replace some existing zoning. For us, we are in a very different position in the city. We have a lot of older housing stock, and we have our inner res zone and our general residential zone, and we've got urban mixed use zones, and we've got a very different scenario. So we've really tried to tailor our submission to consider all of those factors. They had quite a long list of questions at the back, and we've done our best to break that down and provide the answers there. Yeah.
Thanks, Jen. Has anyone got it? Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to just get some clarification, I suppose, around our submission.
Yep.
And the recommendations, and just the maybe I'll just read it, just the beginning, you know, that first paragraph that you had, because it came from the 2025 report, and then now we have this one,
Yeah.
but there hasn't been too much consultation. And anyway, I just want to read this, and I'm just wondering if you could clarify for me, and then I have another question. However, our analysis shows substantial differences between the recommendations of the 2025 report and the proposed amendments in the discussion paper, so I just want to seek clarity on that. These differences have not been outlined or justified by the SPO in the discussion paper, making it difficult to understand the intent and potential implications of the proposed amendments, and undermines transparency in the reform process.
Yeah. I think a lot of that stems from the fact that they've got this new zone, and it's quite different to how they'd originally anticipated it. They were looking at actually a new zone to replace inner res and general res, and the idea was that the state government was going to just replace those two zones across the whole state. Instead, what they've actually done, and to use sort of layman's language, they're sort of kicking the can down the road by saying, actually, we've got this other idea. Here's a new zone. If you so wish to apply in your LGA, you do the work, and then you can apply to the commission to apply this new zone.
Right.
They've also done a lot of changes to the controls. As you can see, there's quite a lot of plot ratio differences, setback differences, building height differences, solar, like a lot of tweaking from what was originally proposed. But what they didn't sort of provide us was the workings and the logic behind that. So we've just made it clear that some of it, our bottom line message is that there is still a lot of inconsistencies between the zones and complexity that is something that we ultimately want to move away from. And we want a simplified assessment tool, we want simplified building controls that are scalable across all the zones, and not to have separate things. Like the new zone has plot ratio, it has a plot ratio tool, but they haven't suggested that you use that in general or inner res. And then they've said, oh, and if you want a new zone, you do it yourself. So yeah, they have stepped away from the original intent of the Improving Resi Standards work in that sense.
Okay.
Amongst all the little nuances. We've had to do a lot of tables to compare what the current controls are, what we have in our SAPs, what was proposed in the improving res and where they've landed. And that's how we've systematically worked through to be able to provide the recommendations that we have.
Sorry,
Go
just
on,
one
yes.
last yeah, and then when, just to clarify, in the apartment code
Yes.
design element
Yep.
around the bicycle parking, like it says, there are no bicycle parking requirements for medium density housing within 800 metres of a high frequency public transport per the revised provisions. And so that's like even if you, say for example, if you need a bike, whatever, just different mobility issues, it's not going to be a requirement for an apartment block code
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah, and look, there is some, you could look at whether or not that goes in the parking code, but in other states, they certainly have that as a requirement, and we have referenced both the New South Wales Apartment Code, which is sort of the gold standard and it's been in place the longest, as well as another jurisdiction in Victoria. But bicycle parking requirements have actually been readily adopted, particularly by developers in other states, because if they provide so much parking, they don't have to provide as much car parking, and it's infinitely cheaper for them to do that. So it is something that has had huge uptake in other states, and it's
also
something
great
we've been trying to consider how it could potentially be applied in Central Hobart, for instance, in the particular purpose zone that we're working on. But yeah, there are some anomalies there that we've tried to highlight in our submission.
Any other contributions, Ben?
Thanks.
I just had one question. Thank you for coming in here and being here. I'm just reading through it and just looking at the background to it, which one of the documents cited, the background documents, was the Improving Residential Standards in Tasmania project. It's not immediately apparent to me. Are residential standards improved in any way by this particular suggestion? Because I couldn't really work that out.
Yeah, look, the good thing is, yes, we're moving towards better solutions. We're moving towards plot ratios, which is a better tool for assessing bulk on the site. There's certainly, what we've tried to do in the submission is certainly where we think they've put something that is good, we've said it's a good idea. So for instance, the new apartment code is a good step forward. We need a code, but they haven't applied it, and there's nuances in the controls that don't necessarily make a lot of sense. They said you need at least 5 apartments, whereas we know in the City of Hobart 3 or 4 is more common, and why would you exclude that? It doesn't apply across all zones, whereas it does in other jurisdictions. So that's one thing that they've done. But in terms of the building standards, certainly we've seen an improvement, and what they've done is increase building heights across the zones. I'm just looking for the relevant page. They've reduced the lot sizes for inner res and general res to really help us densify easier. They've looked at increasing the open space contribution, but again, that applies more to other areas, because it only still applies to subdivision projects, whereas, so we've made a big point there saying that doesn't help us if it's a strata lot division. So yeah, they've certainly gone a long way to improve each of the zones, but in our assessment, we don't think it's gone far enough, or it's not consistent in how. And what the bottom line is, we'd also, instead of trying to say to councils, hey, there's a shiny new zone which has higher building heights and more nuance for more guidance for medium density, we'd like to see those controls in the inner res zone, which is already in effect here. The SBO's initial comment to that was that they were worried about how existing residents might feel with a lot of changes to their existing zone, and that council should make that call. But as you can imagine, us coming in with a whole new zone and might not be appropriate, and as it is, urban mixed use and mixed use zones are actually more effective for us, because we want to see a whole variety of things happening on sites, not just residential development. So for us, it's not necessarily a zone that's that applicable. So I hope that helps, but there is a lot of technical nuances and changes that we've generally supported.
Sure. I guess there's a supplementary question. I'm sort of looking at it from the residents' point of view,
Yep.
I suppose, and so looking for changes that will make the places nicer to live in.
Yes.
And I assume there's something, obviously I couldn't find there was a lot to go through.
There was a lot. I think in terms of design standards and fenestration and those sorts of controls, we still have a long way to go. And that's something that's probably more suited to the local level. We have a lot of, like master builders, HIA, they're very mindful of adding extra layers of control. Eaves, setbacks, how many windows a building has, and all of these sorts of things. It starts to get into that territory where it's a little over-regulated as far as they're concerned. There is that.
No, thank you. We
balance.
saw what happened to the National Construction Code changes, and I guess the same.
There is some of that. There is some of that, but I think plot ratio does give more nuance, and there is a great diagram. I'll find the page on the submission, which we've said you really need a lot more diagrams for us to be able to explain this in more detail. But with the right level of controls that aren't too prescriptive, you can have a better outcome, particularly around deep soil. So that's a new thing to see that starting to come into the planning scheme, which hasn't had a lot of. There hasn't been many controls in Tasmania around that. But for instance, on page 35 of our submission, it shows that if you do apply a sensible plot ratio with landscaping, with deep soil access and parking controls, you should have a better outcome. That shows you the steps there to get a better design outcome.
Excellent. Great, thank you.
Councillor Dallot.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. I mean, it's very comprehensive. I was trying to digest this thing. It's just huge.
The whole team has been working on it, I must say. It's taken a lot of us.
So brilliant work. There's so much to read and to digest. It's not easy. So I will be guided by your expertise and professionalism. So the bottom line for this, the way I'm understanding is to lighten the burden so that it becomes easier to develop.
Yes.
So that we go away from the regulations and be tied down to this bureaucracy.
It's to improve how we can densify sites, and you'll notice that in our recommendations. So, for instance, the idea, if you were to apply the new zone, we've said that a standalone single dwelling house shouldn't have it shouldn't be NPR, or it shouldn't be an acceptable solution. It should be discretionary, as in we're trying to send a strong message to people to actually not just build a single dwelling, but they should be building medium density. So that it goes that far as to suggest that. So it's really about addressing that medium density gap.
So just one follow-up question. So this is not related to subdividing the land. You know, if you have 800, for example, you know, can you then go and say that's subdivided to 400 or whatever?
It does. So what it does, one of the big changes are the subdivision sizes.
Okay, yeah.
So that, what it has done is heavily reduced your minimum lot size in both inner res and general res. It's here somewhere. So that is quite a big change in the minimum lot sizes. It goes from 300 to 150, I believe, in so that it halves. So it's quite a substantial change. I just have to find them, but they're in here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but there's so much detail in there. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. It's quite. That's one of the big changes.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Jen, how long do you reckon this might take to get to the stage of getting TPC, them looking at it, them doing their advertising, etc., to bang, we're good to go?
They're under a lot of pressure. So this was part of the 100 days of the new government. So I wouldn't be surprised if once they finish this consultation, depending on what the feedback is, that they'll want to push towards getting this to the Commission. That they are looking at all sorts of pathways to keep pushing this forward. As you can see, there's a lot to it. So we've recommended that we actually meet back up with them and have a few more workshops as a Greater Hobart team. We've put forward a few ideas around how to how we think this should be approached. We've even included the steps in how we think it should proceed in terms of staging. I think one of the things we would like them to do is make the changes to the inner res and general res as quickly as possible. But I think this idea of the apartment code or a housing diversity code, that might need a bit more work and a little bit more buy-in. But certainly their plan is this year, and the next few months I imagine is going to be quite interesting to see what they, in terms of how they progress it to get it to the Commission, or whether they'll do a wider community engagement period. I think the plan was to do it through the Commission process though.
So it will take quite some time, anything going through this process does, and I
It
think...
usually takes a long time,
Yeah.
but there is pressure from
Sure.
the Housing Minister and things to progress certain aspects of this, so it's hard for us to say.
Yeah, so, which is great, and it's great to get a document like this. It's positive, it's out there, it's got some great ideas. I really do like this new apartment code concept.
Yeah. It's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it really is. I just want to temper everyone's enthusiasm with, look, it's no silver bullet. There's the big thing now. You ask any developer what's stopping it, and it is the cost of goods, and services, and just building per square metre is just outrageously expensive, and you throw this war situation on with just even basic plumbing fittings now. They're just, and everyone's it's just going through the roof. So I think we've got to temper it with that's the reason why. I mean, there's a bit of a hangover of people thinking, I'm not here to stand in judgment of that, but the Commonwealth I still hear, there still is a perception that councillors, as a result of knocking back a lot of things before, that's a big part of the equation. But this will turn it round. I mean, it's turning the public confidence around as well. Smaller to medium-sized developers, I know you sort of run on how you feel about things, and do you don't. It's like buying a car or something like that, and a lot of it's emotive-driven. And this gives confidence, and seeing this, I think it's a great thing, and you can put it on the table, hey guys, this is what we're doing, we can't do any more than this. It's trying to be done at quick speed here. It's getting a lot more options, and it's a great thing for council to put up the flag pole and say we can't be doing much more than at the moment. But there's more to it than just a document, but it's a fantastic step forward, so thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Kelly. Lord Mayor.
Just a question around, I think a couple of years ago there was some documents around apartment design guidelines.
Yeah.
Was that our document or was that state government?
Yeah, good question. We were sort of heavily involved in that, and where they've sort of pivoted to is this new code. So that builds on that work. Yeah, and that's where
that work is no longer.
It was considered,
right.
But the idea is that this code would do that work. It's certainly, I think they've said it somewhere in the discussion paper, that there would be more work that they would hope to feed into that code to bring more elements of design, which would also then bring it in line with other states. But this is their first, get the code in and start introducing various elements and design standards into it, is their thinking.
All right, thanks Jen. Thanks Karen. Do you got a final word before you go?
No.
No?
Well done, Jen.
Thanks, Jen. Yep. Okay. The recommendation moved by the Deputy Lord Mayor is the Hobart Workshop Committee endorse the submission to the State Planning Office in response to the Tasmanian Planning Commission scheme, making it easier to develop medium-density housing. Discussion paper as set out in Attachment A, and Part 2, the CEO be authorised to finalise the submission and to lodge it with the State Planning Office. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Okay, carried unanimously. All right, thank you. Next item, 7.2 is Hobart Municipal Emergency Management Committee, insights from the LA fires for Hobart. Welcome. Christopher and Christian.
Well, there's no presentation, Chair. I'll give a quick overview perhaps, but yeah, more driven by questions.
Yep. What you got?
Good early evening, everybody. My name's Christopher Kashinki. I'm the manager of City Resilience, and to my right is Christian Van Dam, the program leader of City Resilience. Earlier this year, the Municipal Emergency Management Committee of the City of Hobart ran a workshop titled Insights from the Los Angeles Fires for Hobart, and the purpose of the workshop was to look at what happened in the LA fires. We had 33 people from 7 or 8 different agencies across Hobart, GBEs and government, including emergency services represented, and the purpose was to, from the LA fires, and given the great risk of Hobart centred basically in the Wellington Ranges and surrounding areas, and the bushfire risk inherent in that, was to discuss 3 key areas: preparation, evacuation and response amongst the group attendees, and to consider both corporate, i.e. government, and community risk in those 3 key areas. Now, just as a really quick background, what is the Municipal Emergency Management Committee? It's a statutory committee under the Emergency Management Act that reports to the Regional Emergency Management Committee, and is there to support all of government in our domain, which is municipal areas around corporate and community resilience and the risks associated with that across all hazards. And that so we ran the workshop at the MEMC, and we're coming to this workshop today because from that workshop and the key risk areas identified, a few of them concern us. Some us leading, and quite a few with us engaging collaboratively with other agencies to explore further. So I'll just quickly just recap the actual meeting. We had 3 guest speakers presenting first before we workshopped. They were Margaret Morton from Gender and Disaster Australia, giving her expertise on disaster resilience. And then we had Danny Jackson, who was the Senior Operational Commander from Tas Police, talking about the current emergency management arrangements for bushfire response across all agencies, and the collaboration between TFS, TASPOL, us and all the other key partners. And then we had Mel Gent from the City of Hobart Fire and Biodiversity team talking about our internal bushfire mitigation measures in the Wellington Ranges. Very quickly, the agencies attending were, I've alluded to some: City of Hobart, Red Cross, RACT, Tas Police, SCS and TFS, UTAS, Resilient Building Council and the Bureau of Meteorology. So I'll just quickly hand to you, Christian, to really quickly just discuss the methodology.
Yeah, sure. So I guess we had 3 main focus areas for the workshop. So it was looking at bushfire preparedness, bushfire evacuation and bushfire response. And we adopted a oil methodology, which is used quite commonly in emergency management, which looked at observation, insight, lessons identified and lessons learned. So what that meant is that through the actual workshop, we had all of the participants sat at different tables, and they took down all of their collective notes on butcher's paper. We then analysed that thematically, and we then clustered that, and that gave us the different sort of, I guess, clusters in the results chapter. And then we went out afterwards and we actually consulted with a lot of the member agencies of the Municipal Emergency Management Committee, and so that then gave us the lessons identified for what the focus areas would become. I guess one of the things was that we never really got to that point where we got to lessons learned, and that was just, I guess, due to there's a lot of the way that we structured it. I think we had quite a broad range of participants, and they were all with different levels of experience and with different focus areas, and so we weren't able to drill down into individual focus areas. So again, it was a very high level workshop, and then even in the findings we were never able to fully drill down, but I think it gave a good overview of where we sit in terms of Hobart's bushfire risk, and also areas where we can continue to work with other agencies on.
Okay. Thank you. Just as a bit of final context, the Municipal Emergency Management Committee, for those that don't know, is chaired by the Lord Mayor, and the Executive Officer is the Municipal Emergency Management Coordinator, which is myself. So that's enough for the introducing. I think we can move around to questions. Back to you, Bill. Councillor Harvey, sorry.
Councillor Bill's up. Who's up? Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. Just a
sorry, Ben, you were first. Sorry, I keep calling you Ben. Sorry, Councillor Lohberger.
Thank you, Councillor Bill Harvey. Look, I just had a couple of specific questions just about the vulnerable communities section. Obviously, we passed a protocol recently regarding extreme weather events, including severe heat weather, which is possibly likely to have been declared already if there's a big fire. So I guess I've got two questions. Is there any role for that extreme weather shelter that that protocol kicks off in the event of a fire? And if not, what actually happens if that shelter has already been activated and a fire comes through? How's that going to sort of work?
Do you want to talk to it?
You can, because you were about to say something.
Yeah, sure. So I guess with the extreme weather protocol, the main purpose behind the protocol is where an evacuation centre hasn't been stood up. It's to sort of say, when you have really, you have a heat wave, for example, it doesn't necessarily trigger emergency management response, but there are still people that are potentially impacted by that hazard.
Yeah.
Whereas with a bushfire, I would say in 9 out of 10 times, we would have an evacuation centre established for that. And when we would, so that would be for TFS to determine which evacuation centre we would open, and it would be one that we would purposely choose is not in a bushfire prone area or is nowhere near where the fire actually is. And again, there's also evacuation centres in neighbouring councils that we could potentially use as well, like the MyState Arena, which is a really big event, and we couldn't have people actually housed within the LGA.
Yeah. So I guess, not really a role for it. What does happen if it's already been stood up and homeless people are sheltering in it? Is there any role for this particular work to maybe move that population from, I think it's Mavor's House is where we'll have them, into the TFS preferred shelter? Or
again, I think we would be we would look closely at which evacuation centre we stood up to begin with, and most of the evacuation centres are in the urban areas, so pretty low risk. But if that was the case, then I know that TFS have done exercises looking at how they can actually move people from different, vulnerable or exposed sites.
Right. No, thank you. I know it's a bit specific for this.
Yeah,
it's just sort of where I wanted to go.
We've been involved before in aged care homes and the like, where there has been specific programs to relocate those people that require assistance, and I would see this would be in a similar situation to that.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Sal.
Thanks, Chair. You went through the agencies that were involved, but there was a noticeable absence of the ambulance. Just wondering what that was about.
They were invited, and they are a standing member on the Municipal Emergency Management Committee. They just didn't attend.
It just strikes me as really concerning because we're talking about evacuations from firegrounds and vulnerable members of the community, and the agency that will be responsible for doing that is ambulance. So I don't really know how we can have a fully informed conversation without having the
Tas Ambulance,
So it's there.
you probably know more about this than I do, but Tas Ambulance recently have identified that, for example, a catastrophic hazard, they were missing the centralised coordinators to scale up. The person that can link Burnie, Devonport, Hobart and Launceston for ambulance response in a large-scale event. That new role's been filled now, so I think they'll be more forthcoming, particularly for attendance at the committees and capacity shortly for the interagency engagement in emergency management.
Anyone want to jump in? We've got dead heat then. I'll go with Councillor Dutta and then the Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Just a few observations and then questions with regards to what I've read. Now, the 1967 bushfire, nearly 60 years ago, how prepared were we then compared to now, if it happens? Something of that nature.
I think, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's quite different now. At the time, there wasn't a lot of the emergency management systems that exist now. So the Tasmanian Fire Service wasn't operating in the same way that it is now. It was much more fragmented, and there's a lot of lessons learned, including like the creation of the Civil Defence Agency, which is now the National Emergency Management Agency. A lot of the support systems, state and federally, didn't exist. Also didn't have a lot of the equipment as well, like firebombing and even just the trained personnel to fight it. So I think, again, it was quite a catastrophic event, but also the emergency management sector is completely different from what it is today, and we have so many more resources and equipment.
All right. So we're in a much better position compared to what we were 60 years ago. Now, again, I don't know if this is your question or the CEO. Is there a council liability if we don't take on the responsibilities, if we ought to have reasonably foreseen some of these dangers?
So I can speak from a flood perspective, which is that generally if you can demonstrate that you've communicated that risk to the public and you've demonstrated that you have done what you can reasonably to manage that risk, that attenuates any kind of liability. Generally, councils have competing priorities in terms of investment and resources. So it's generally the only times that councils have been found liable is when they have known about a risk and they haven't communicated it. So that I would assume, at least in a flood case.
Can I add to that? That was discussed in the LA context. These kinds of questions with emergency services, I had these direct discussions. The LA fires, the councils over there, there's 4 layers of government, not 3. It's the municipalities that control emergency management resources and other jurisdictional agencies. So if you have the situation, for example, in California, where the mayor potentially can be liable because they are also the response management authority as the municipality controlling all of emergency management operations. That's not the case here. The councils are not the response management authority, it's TFS. The operationally, jurisdiction lies with them. I can't answer for liability, but the jurisdiction lies with TFS, not with the councils. But we are the custodians for the community, so it's important that we enhance the jurisdictional agency of in any hazard with our municipal planning around corporate and community mitigation and community resilience.
Thank you.
Well, Mayor.
Thank you. It's good to see the report come to council, and so I just want to clarify. You mentioned this happened earlier this year. It actually happened earlier, 2025. So now that there's once the council sort of signs off on that, we make this available to the community on our website somewhere. So on the 6 items for council potentially, I think it's on page 248 of the attachment. Do you feel that the focus areas suggested focus areas for Hobart bushfire preparedness from the perspective of the City of Hobart, do you feel that we've got sufficient budget allocation for those, or a plan if we don't have sufficient budget for six items? I presume
Yeah,
item six.
I know which ones at the table you're referring to. The
Yeah.
first 6 in table 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's probably potentially 3 or 4 others in table 2, even 3 where it says all, that we would also be important collaborators. So I think there's actually up to 17 actions if you include our also collaboration led by other agencies. In terms of budget, so what we've done is, no, we can't answer that question right now, but in order to be able to answer that question, we've internally just formed a bushfire working group, bringing together community development, city resilience and the FAB team, so that we're working as one, so that we can start to look at these actions and prioritise internally. Now, the good news is, because separately those 3 teams have a lot of external stakeholder engagement, and by bringing them together, I think we'll be able to get this done faster and avoid duplication. Because you've got the statutory operational focus of emergency management and resilience in the city resilience team, the community resilience and particularly emphasis on recovery from the community team, and the FAB team has a lot of close ties under the FMAC committees with TFS, and a lot of our operational and engagement with the TFS's community engagement team, direct already under several programs. I think the remit for a lot of that work in terms of budget should start with that bushfire internal working group informing ELT in the future. So, yeah.
And think proposals will come forward from
Yes.
that.
Yep.
And secondly, a big motivation for this was obviously around evacuation planning and the lack of it being done in the state at the moment. But and there was we had a presentation from a guy from CSIRO who spoke to a group of elected members about a tool he's got that is quite helpful for evacuation planning in terms of potential blockages of traffic and ways to deal with different scenarios. Do you know whether that something might come from that, so that we might actually get some? I mean, it's not our responsibility; it's someone else's responsibility. But do you think that's likely to kind of unlock some action in that space? Or?
I think so, and I'm hopeful. Currently, there's 2 separate streams of engagement that we've assisted triggering, because they came to our MEMC as well. So there's the CSIRO model developer. The 3 TASPOL regional commanders, who are the North, Northwest and South regional emergency management controllers, who I report to in an emergency, the Southern Controller, received the similar presentation that we received at the Municipal Emergency Management Committee. Their feedback from all 3 was highly positive. They took that back to the Commissioner, Donna Adams, and the current situation is that I think they've got some work to do to catch up to the use of that, and that is the engagement with State Growth, who are the traffic management modellers in Tasmania, not Tas Police, but Tas Police are the operational arm of evacuation, of implementing evacuation. TFS trigger it, Tas Police conduct it, but the modelling of it sits with State Growth. So you've got 3 different agencies trying to do the same thing. So Police's perspective is that the modelling is really useful, but they're not the executors of the modelling, they're the implementers of it. So second then to that is DPAC with State Growth are in the process of engaging with City of Hobart on a future risk information portal, and they've recently, I believe, stated that they're quite keen to proceed collaboration with CSIRO to include that modelling work in the risk information portal. So 2 separate streams going on. what we will do is continue to advocate on that, but really we need Tas Police and State Growth to work together. I think State Growth need to TasPol need to advocate to State Growth on the need to potentially use this for improved traffic modelling in general, plus for emergencies. I know that's a bit of a spider's web, but that's where it's currently sitting.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. I put a major fire probably the city's greatest risk. I really do. And it's up there at least in the top 2 or 3. And as all these experts see, there's been some really good shows on TV about Hobart's problem. It's not if, it's when. All the modelling says there is going to be another big one. I remember 1967 fire quite well. I was only 6 or 7, but the psychological impact it has too is beyond the financial and the immediate horrible stuff that happens. It's like Port Arthur, those who are around the Port Arthur the chilling sort of psychological effect that does have on society is another major thing that you can't really quantify, and it can affect the economy, the psychology of people and the social aspects for years to go. And the 67 one did, it was just horrendous. And if you want to see some real, sort of pick up on that vibe of the chillingness of it, there's some brilliant interviews on YouTube of the 67 fires where they went one-on-one and interviewed people about 10 or 15 years ago, and it just really does put you into that zone of what people go through and what happened. This report's great. I mean, it's chilling, once again, similarity with this LA situation, isn't it? You know, the increase in population, the increase in the growth of properties in these densely wooded areas, and guess what? Geez, it sounds like Hobart, doesn't it? And if one of the more advanced countries, if not the most advanced country in the world, who admit now their systems weren't good for that LA fire, lack of integration, I know the report there between authorities and that. If they didn't have their act together, you know, the most affluent and better organised people in the world, and this is what happened to them, it's a big wake-up call for us. I think we can learn so much from their experience. Just in relation to Councillor Dutter's comments, yes, we are, he's asking are we better off? Yeah, absolutely, we are better prepared with more equipment, communications networks and all that than we were in 1967 when there was only landline phones. And those interviews touch a lot on this stuff we're talking about now. I was referring to earlier, but so has the urban footprint with houses and all these things. You know, the amount of, just reading some of this stuff too, the amount of decks we all put on in bushfire areas, you know, it's just with the fuel load now of houses.
With your wood stacked underneath it, yeah.
Exactly, we all probably do it, and there's leaves going right up to us. Look at Ridgeway, Fern Tree, Tolman's Hill, Mount Nelson. And when these big fires go through, remember what happened with Canberra, these firestorms are just like a raging freight train, and nothing on earth will stop them. And it's just next level stuff to some urban bushfires and a bit of helicopters flying around and that. I really, really honestly do worry about this stuff, and the more prepared we can be, it's almost like it should be a separate budget line item that we are really focusing on this fire stuff. It really does, it really worries the socks off me. And I just like to reinforce that. And this is great, once again, this is great work we're doing to at least recognise that. We just cannot be prepared enough for it. So, yeah, thanks for the report.
Thanks, Councillor Kelly. Yep.
Just had a question. You know, all organisations will have a trial. You know, we'll have the siren go. We'll all have to go through the process of what it means to do an evacuation. But we don't really seem to have them on a community level. I'm just wondering whether or not that's something we should throw on the table and just say maybe there should be a day where the community is educated and we actually walk through, the whole community, through what it means to go through a evacuation plan. So it becomes a complete community engagement process. They know what it means, they go through the motions. I know that it would be possibly quite destabilising, it could possibly be expensive, but I just wonder whether or not, we don't have that on the table. Sorry, it was just a thought.
The Sparking Conversations Igniting Action program, when I read the debriefs from that work, was very useful, particularly in identifying that different pockets of the community have different needs and have different capability, and the power of that work showed that you need buy-in from the community, for example, to communicate and support each other on initiatives exactly like you just said. To talk with each other and figure out, well, what are we going to do and where are we going to go with those experts even coming to them.
It's in the recommendations
Yeah.
that we activate the community, that we do
Okay,
rehearsals
well,
and
I
things.
mean, I'm talking like, say, we're going to have a day, and this day is we're all going to do an evacuation, we're all going to go through this process, we're all going to know where we go, and actually physically do it. I just thought it was a very different way of looking at it. We talk about it, but we don't do anything.
We did, as part of the consultation on the report, we did engage with the Tasmanian Fire Service, and they noted, I guess, a reluctance to do something like that, and I think that was really the concern, that if you go through that process of evacuating, say, a suburb or something like that, and you say, this is the scenario, and we're going to evacuate you, say, over here. What happens if you have a fire and it comes from the other direction and that road is closed? Will people actually understand that scenario that they tested, that they need to act differently under the real life scenario situation? And so that nuance, I think they've sort of said, at least for the moment, that they would prefer to just focus on better, community engagement, doing things like the bushfire ready neighbourhoods, talking about things like, where they evacuate generally, evacuation routes, nearby safe places, and what evacuation routes and planning you do at the household level, but not actually doing the exercise, just for that concern that you actually create probably potential for people to actually act wrongly in an event.
Yeah, and even though that's not necessarily based on the literature, or it's just the current vibe of the emergency services are very traditional. But all the Royal Commission recommendations of the last few years has been that you do involve the community in evacuation planning. But we've just got to slowly, there'll be a change of culture eventually where it'll be seen as something that is okay to do. It doesn't have to be the entire community, but even community organisations and key community centres like aged care centres and some of the really vulnerable communities, I think.
We'll just go back to you, Councillor Alderman Bloomfield. Had you finished?
No, that's all I had.
Okay. Yep.
To support the Lord Mayor just said, that another pushback is that irrespective of the fire front and its direction, some of our communities only have one way in, one way out, and yes, state emergency services operate on leave early, but we could still be working closely with those communities on what leave early looks like, and for them to be talking with each other. Because Tas Police have already identified in exercises they don't have the resources to door knock everybody. That's a real risk.
Okay. Any other comments?
Just ask one question.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Sorry, you go.
No, you go.
Okay. No, it's all right.
No, you go.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for this report, and I didn't have time to read every little word of it, but I did just want to make a comment. I was in LA in 2025 in January when the fire was happening, and what I noticed, aside from the fact that it was easy to get around, was that all of the businesses were involved, like from hotels to community groups to schools, and people were actually obviously being evacuated into hotels. People were bringing things into the hotels, from clothes to teddy bears for kids and things like that. So it was this massive, and it's such a, LA is huge, it's massive. I remember, just even going from Compton to Long Beach, and it was just so big and vast at the time, but still everybody felt like they were trying to take care of each other, from that really big, across the board, from big hotels and organisations to schools. I'm just wondering, like I said, I didn't read all of it. Was that part of anything in terms of how we sort of leverage or work with those big bigger sort of hotels, schools, any community, let's go do this, kind of drop things off here, or sport?
That's quite a broad question.
Okay.
I think I wouldn't say that they're vulnerable people, but I think we have a lot more work to do on communications with all the different kinds of things you've mentioned. Most organisations and companies have their own evacuation plans, but they're usually just at the buildings. They're not regional. So there's two separate areas there, and we've run lots of exercises for evacuating buildings in fire, but something that the Lord Mayor's alluded to under the Royal Commission, we have a lot of work to do on regional community evacuation, notwithstanding that we've identified that there's some pockets more critical than others, particularly on the urban fringes. So in answer to your question, I think there's two parts to it. Is we've got a lot of work to do with vulnerable people. We've identified that. A question came up earlier on transport of those. But secondly, I think the general message from State Emergency Services is leave early under all scenarios. That's very broad and sweeping. What about the people we miss?
I think just a lot of that question was toned, and it's probably more appropriate for Kimbra sitting there in terms of our recovery and activating our businesses and being part of what happens after an event. And I think we more take that as a comment in terms of that's certainly what we would endeavour to see is business and community sort of working together in the event of a recovery from a major bushfire. So
Yeah,
thanks.
yeah, and I guess, so the report itself is much more focused on preparedness and response to a bushfire rather than that, what happens afterwards.
Right.
So we didn't really capture that very well. But one of the things that we've recently done is we've been working with the economic development team and generating some kind of like list of all the businesses within the Hobart LGA and how we can more easily communicate to them during an event as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean, something like that.
Yeah.
That would be really good.
Because we've had some issues in the past where you know ABNs don't necessarily reflect businesses, and you know, because locations aren't always the same. If a business is renting a property and things like that, and so like rates, for example, because people can rent out their properties. So we're looking at how we can best communicate with them during the event or after as well. Yeah,
because I think that would be part of getting prepared. Recovery, but also just that long sort of along the continuum of something
Single
does
point
happen.
of reference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thanks, Deputy. We'll go to Ryan
Really
Salt,
quick,
and then we'll go to Alderman Zuko.
Thanks. Just a really quick question. With regard to LA fires, I know that there's different circumstances in different cities. One of the things that I understand Hobart is particularly problematic for is wind, and that the mountain is fairly reliant on aerial resources. But if we have ground speed too high, the aerial resources can't fly. I just wondered if there's any commentary. It's really just an exploratory question to understand better. Just how I understand the critical fire days, but how vulnerable are we on a critical fire day if we have no aircraft in the sky?
Highly vulnerable.
We're pretty much done.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's aircraft limitations under wind speed and also availability of water for those helicopters and aircraft because they're reticent. The cost is huge if it's salt water. They have to use fresh water.
Yeah.
So we've got some critical gaps on the latter, and the former is they can't fly.
Yeah, so I think speaking with TFS, their focus is really to try and put it out as fast as possible so that then that you don't have that spread. And so if you can knock it out relatively quickly, then you don't, if winds pick up or anything like that, you don't have that risk that it spreads rapidly. But we are also currently established a working group with Taswater and TFS actually looking at water supplies for the mountains to support like aerial firefighting. Just noting that again, you know, a lot of the dams and reserves around the Wellington Ranges are currently unavailable. So we're trying to figure out if we can set up both temporary and permanent solutions there as well.
Yeah, I've actually been directly involved in 2 fires. One is the Denali Tasman, and the other one was actually the Wisdom Vale, Gilston Bay one. The Denali Tasman, I actually spent nearly 3 days at the refuge centre, City Hall, and we were always in contact. I was there 24/7 for 3 days. We're always in contact with all the authorities and how, and we get to the point about wind and planes and helicopters and all transportation, because everyone, not everyone, mostly everyone from the Tasman Peninsula were ferried up. So because they couldn't drive through, and I had a cousin down there actually with my car, so everyone was ferried up, brought to the city, come to the refuge centre at City Hall, and from there we either provided bedding for them and or hotels. I actually put people up in my apartment. So things that do adapt as well, because you've got to look at how the fire's going, and this is where I'm going to get to, where Ryan brought up the wind factors. I own a property on Sugarloaf Hill, and during those fires, we couldn't get in. We were stuck, couldn't get to our property to defend our property until there was a wind change. So there was a wind change, and then we were able to get through to get to our property. But whilst we're up at our property fighting the fires with what we had reasonably good equipment, wind change again. So all of a sudden we've fought the fire on one side, and all of a sudden we've got the fire coming on 2 fronts with a wind change. And that, I was in communication with Tas Fire to the point that we couldn't fight 2 fronts. We could fight one front from the equipment we had, but we couldn't fight 2 fronts. And we saw the helicopter up. I notified Tas Fire that we needed assistance immediately, but they said, we've already got you on hand, fire truck will be there in 2 minutes, and 3 fire trucks pulled up in no time. So wind plays a major factor. So we can plan for what we want to plan, but wind changes the whole nature, and I think Hobart has got that problem when there are fires, how wind changes the directional of the fire and how it changes the resources that we need. And I've got to say one thing, Hobart does need helicopters in the air in particular to at least direct the fire brigade or fire authorities to where they are needed at a given point in time. Because if that helicopter was not above us and those 3 fire trucks didn't hit us, we'd already gone away from the house because we couldn't battle it. There was only a small section of my property, my house got caught, but if that hadn't happened, my house was gone. So that's wind created the problem, and thank God for the resources that you have in the sky. So I think that's one thing we've got to ensure in a city like Hobart, which is hilly and everything, that we've got the resources in the sky if we have a major fire.
All right, okay, thank you. I've got some comments, but I think I'll save it for one of the other items, which is probably more relevant, the other fire items. Okay, final word before you go? No?
No, well, no. I think we've talked.
Covered it? All right. Okay, no, well done. Beautiful, thank you. Oh, okay, hang on, we have a recommendation, gang. Okay. Why don't you put it here? Oh, okay. The council endorses the outcome report, insights from LA's fires for Hobart, attachment A. Someone like to move that? Thank you, Alderman Bloomfield. Anyone against that? We're all in favour? All those in favour, say aye. Aye. Okay, those against? Declare that carried. Okay, well, now we're going to move on to item... item 8.3, item for workshopping, which we've brought forward, which is the midterm review of the City of Hobart Rating and Valuations Strategy 24 to 28.
Thank you very much, everyone. So we've got a PowerPoint presentation, and it's complemented by the papers that are in your packs, so which includes a discussion paper, the covering report, and also the prior review we did on the maximum percentage increase cap. So today what we'll cover, we'll run over the purpose of this session and provide a bit of context and background to the rating and valuation strategy. Some initial outcomes from the strategy adopted when it was first adopted back in 2024. And what has changed since it took effect, the work we did to review the maximum percentage increase cap. Some additional focus areas, we'll focus on those key issues for discussion, and then some timing and next steps. So just by way of context, and I think the first dot point is probably really important, just to clarify that rates are a form of property tax, so the principles of taxation apply, and that was really heavily outlined in the original strategy document, and it's the way in which we apply our rates. So what the Act actually says is that rates are a form of taxation, and it's assumed that the value of your property will influence how much you actually pay in rates. But the amount of rates that are required each year comes from the budget, so this isn't about how much money we raise in rates, it's about who pays what in respect of rates. And just a couple of reminders that when property values increase, we don't receive a rating windfall, we don't receive more revenue from that. An increase in property values doesn't cause rates to rise, conversely. And a change in our rating strategy, so any changes we make doesn't mean that we're going to get more rates. It just means that who pays the share of rates might change. So the amount charged to a property in rates depends on the property's value, and the values are not determined by us, they're determined by the valuer general, and there's a 6-year cycle for a whole of municipal area revaluation. But every 2 years we do what's called indexations, as the state government does that, and basically it applies an adjustment factor by land use and by suburb, interestingly, which helps smooth the differences in property values over 6 years, because 6 years is quite a long time. So up until 30 June 2024 we used AAV, and as part of the review we moved from 1 July 2024 to using capital value. I'll talk about that in a slide to come. We raised rates for general rates, and stormwater removal service rates. They are valuation based, and we have charges for waste management and FOGO, food organics, garden organics collection services. And we also collect, on behalf of the state government, we collect the money for the fire levy and also for the waste levy. So they're paid on behalf, that money passes through us and is paid to the state government. So why did we need to change? Why do we even need a strategy? So the former system was a single rate of the dollar that we applied to every property, irrespective of where you were or what your land use was, and we used assessed annual value. We knew coming up to the review that there were some constraints with AAV. So the legislation says that assessed annual value can't be less than 4% of your capital value. So we had this fault line. You remember we talked about that in the workshops. But what really prompted it was the outcomes from the 2020 municipal revaluation. So we had residential properties increasing massively
46% was the average, but we saw some properties going up 300%, so it wasn't uniform throughout that rate base. Commercial and industrial only increased by about 3%, so there was a huge range of reasons for that. We saw the COVID impact, we saw population growth, we saw housing constraints in the market. So the valuation shifts, and you might remember at the time, it was if we'd done nothing, the residential ratepayers would have paid $8.3 million more in rates than they were at that time, and commercial would have paid $4.4 million less. So the rating shocks would have been tremendous had we not done something. So those outcomes would have been really inconsistent had we not done something with the fairness and equity, capacity to pay, and predictability and stability taxation principles. So the rating evaluation strategy was a 12-month review. We'd been working on it for a long time as well prior to that. There was community consultation, there was an option paper, we put 5 different options for the community. And the outcomes from the review was to move to capital value rating, to use differential rating. Now, differential rating, as outlined in the strategy, was used to manage the transition, but also it was felt it was really fair that different land uses paid different amounts of rates, different part of the rate burden for capital value. And we included the continuation, because it had been introduced prior, of the differential for short stay and vacant residential land. The maximum percentage increase cap was introduced, and that was because had we moved across to capital value rating and done nothing, then properties would have experienced a really large increase or decrease in rates payable, and of course it's really important we have that stability. And importantly, through that review, we focused on providing support to those people who had least capacity to pay rates, and there was a range of things that we've done there to support people. So importantly, and just again, at the heart of the rating strategy is those rating principles and those taxation principles. And these are just a few, they're all outlined in the strategy. Fairness and equity is really, really important. Sustainability for our rate base, that contributes 65% of our revenues, that's really important. Simplicity, we try where possible to make it simple and understandable. And of course, capacity to pay, which is linked to those principles of taxation as well. And we use this as a guide, so it's used as a guide for raising our rates every year. So I just wanted to highlight this slide. So this slide actually came from the pack during the workshops for the strategy, and it's designed to show that even though we move from AAV to capital value, the portion of each land use and what they paid didn't alter. So we didn't get more money. Each land use contributed the same portion of rates as before, and what it meant that there's just a different rate in the dollar for each land use to reflect that. And again, council does not receive any additional revenue. So at the time we adopted this strategy, we had the 7 individual differential rates. So we put residential and primary production together, similar, and there's only 2 primary production properties in the municipal area, so we decided not to have a separate one for that. Rate burden, 57% of the rate burden comes from those 2 land uses. Commercial and industrial, 32% comes from them. Public enterprise, short stay accommodation, sport and rec, vacant land, and vacant residential land to reflect the differential we have there. And those were the differentials that we applied at the time. We did say at the time that they were indicative because each year, we create different rates in the dollar, obviously. So, and again, this is outlined in the strategy, and I haven't gone into too much detail because it's all there, but differential rating enables the equitable distribution of the rates burden. It does reflect that different land uses, we have different policy reasons for setting the differentials, and different land use contribute or benefit from different types of services that we provide. Importantly, Each differential must have, so you'll remember we got this advice at the time, each differential must have a clear attribute of the land, so that's a requirement under the Local Government Act. You need to, the differential must be by land use.
Just got a question. I went through all of this trying to work out where it was going to be highlighted. A while ago we identified that there was a significant growth in rates-free buildings. When you are a charity or an educational facility, you don't pay rates. And we got a value for that, and it had grown from about, what was it, 1.2 million to $6 million. It was quite an extraordinary growth in only 10 years. And then we ascertained then that that $6 million has been fully funded or covered over by all the other commercial properties in the area. Now, we've just had some significant growth in the rate-free organisations. If Calvary takes over Hobart Private, I believe, did pay rates, Calvary will not. That's an enormous amount of rates we're now going to lose. And we've got a few other big changes like that coming through. So I guess my question is along the lines that we've got a growth in a sector that actually doesn't contribute, and it has to be compensated by somebody. And I know that the amount of rates growth that we're expected to pay really was quite high by commercial operators. And if we keep on seeing this extraordinary growth in rate-free premises, it's going to create an inordinate growth in rate cost to those businesses left standing. And are we going to do anything about ameliorating that? Is there anything we can do to spread that load? Because I think it's got really material now. It's a lot of money.
It is, and thank you for the question, which is a great one. What I've done is, because we've, I know we've spoken about it at the Risk and Audit panel as well, I've got a slide at the end of the pack because I wanted to talk about this issue, the legislation, and what I've done since we spoke last was I've actually broken it down into who pays what out of that amount of money. And so could I leave the question?
Yeah, sure, I'm fine. I just want to make sure we covered it because I just think it's incredibly material today.
Thank you. And it's a really good question. Thank you. Okay, so when we went live with the strategy back in 2024, the initial outcomes were that we saw that stabilising of rate increases. So prior to that, we'd seen not that stability, so that we saw that with the strategy. We had fewer inquiries than any prior year, and I was really surprised because I thought with a change like this we would get lots of inquiries, and we just didn't. So it was, I think, understood, people could understand it, which was good. There was minimal impacts on most land uses, including residential. We did get some feedback, and we sought to address it immediately. So the feedback we got was, it led to that further review of the maximum percentage increase cap. You might recall we'd set it at 10%, and it was subsequently reduced down to 5% for 25-26, and it's not proposed that changes. So the midterm review, what is the purpose, or what was the purpose of doing this now? And when we said we'd do it 2 years in, that time has gone very quickly. But the purpose was we wanted to confirm that the strategy remains fit for purpose. We wanted to assess how it's operating in practice. We wanted to consider valuation movements, so what's happened over the last 2 years, policy settings, market conditions, and test whether any refinements are required ahead of the 26-27 rates. So what did we decide to include in the scope? So basically it was really looking at the strategy itself, and we wanted to have a look to see how it was aligning with the Council's strategic objectives and important taxation principles. We wanted to do a deep dive on the differentials, including the differentials that are currently set because of policy for short stay and vacant residential land. Do a deep dive on the service rates and charges, have a look at the impacts of state government indexation, and have a look at just our administrative and compliance processes around this. So what has changed since 2024? I've put there property market moderated but remains constrained. I've got some slides further on to sort of just do a wee bit of a snapshot on that. There's been 2 lots of indexation We did factor in indexation in 2024. There's now been another set of indexation, and I've put the details in the covering report, but you can see there that when we went live, there was a 10% increase in property values for the commercial sector, but not any other land use. And it was across the whole municipal area. It didn't sort of change by suburbs. This is what it looks like for 2026, which means that from 1 July 2026, when we're raising the rates, we need to adopt the increased property values as a result of indexation. So what you can see there, and I think the first line for residential, that's the second table down, that's really interesting. It says that there's no valuation increase for residential properties in Battery Point, Dunerne, Kingston, Sandy Bay and West Hobart. And just in case you're asking about Kingston, we do have 150 odd properties. They're actually in Summaries and Proctors Road and technically classified in our municipal area, not in the Kingborough municipal area. So they're not going up. So the property values are not increasing in those suburbs. However, everywhere else in the municipal area, they're going up by 5%.
Chair, do you mind? Can I just clarify that? In Kingston, I don't know if that's news to anyone else, but how is it possible that we have homes in Kingston that are in our municipality?
Because of the way the boundary...
So the boundary for the Kingborough boundary doesn't include all of Kingston as a suburb?
So it's got there's properties in 2 streets that fall in our municipal area as opposed to the Kingborough municipal area. That's correct. That's right. Yeah.
Don't forget to door knock those ones.
Yes.
No, I'll be down at Blackman's Bay like, boy, you can vote for me.
Gone too far.
2 streets. So those 2 streets in that Kingston area have not increased.
They haven't increased.
No.
They haven't. That's right. So, and just to clarify with commercial, when these are actually increases since the last municipal revaluation, so it's not another 15% from 2024. It's basically 15% since the last municipal area revaluation.
Sorry, so you're saying that commercial's gone up and residential hasn't gone up?
That's correct, according to the Valuer General.
I'll tell you what, I know where the Valuer General's doing his valuations from, because you speak to property owners in the commercial sector, a lot of them have actually reduced their rents to keep their tenants. That doesn't go towards an increase, it goes towards a decrease in the return on investment. I'm baffled. I'm totally baffled there, absolutely. I know where the Valuer General what is he doing, a flyover?
One more thing, just about the other suburbs that aren't mentioned, but were there rises in the ones that aren't mentioned, or do you just pop those ones out as examples?
So basically, general covers every other suburb.
Right. So everything else went up a little bit. Yeah.
We've raised that specific issue with the Valuer General that Alderman Zuko is talking about, because it's not, we've heard that from a lot of different building owners or commercial businesses within Hobart. So.
Oh, I can give you want a list of them. They all ring me up and tell me I just have to reduce my rent by 80,000, 100,000, and you're still charging me rates and this and that. It's constant. And I've got to say, it's.
So how do we check that? How do we get another evaluation?
So these are statutory valuations done by the Valuer General, by the state government. So we don't have.
No one reviews them.
They can object.
They can object. That's
okay.
right.
The individual property can object.
Even with indexation, they can object.
It's baffling. Absolutely
Yes.
Right.
And of course, just to go back to at the municipal revaluation, you saw residential increasing by 46% and commercial industrial going up by 3%. That was at the last municipal area. That's after 6 years worth. So this is interesting.
Yeah, but that's the reason why you've gone to this current rather than the AAV. You've changed it. So it was the commercial sector paying more and the residential sector not paying their valuations. And now we've got this differential and we've got this proposed increase which is not a reality. It's not a reality.
And what was the first slide? 67% of the rates comes from residential.
57.
57.
Yeah. 32 from commercial.
Mm.
And I just wanted to maybe say, although I'll talk about it in a forward slide, I'm actually not recommending a change to the differentials for commercial and industrial as part of the review. Supplementary valuations from development have also occurred over the last few years, and also we're starting to see a little bit more information of how the differentials are actually operating in practice. Okay, so to have a look at these differentials, are the differentials still fit for purpose, are they proportionate, and are they aligned with our original policy intent? So we've seen the impacts of indexation, and this is how the differentials look at the moment if we accept all the increases that have occurred, which of course we don't have discretion over the valuations that we get. And you can see they're actually not too dissimilar to what we originally had. And I'm just going to show you this slide. So what I've done is had a look at everything since 1 July 2025. So that's the indexation, that's all the development that's occurring in the city. And barring industrial has gone up by more than 10%, and that's because of the indexation. As you can see, commercial have only gone up by 5% more. And if you have a look at all of the other property values, there's actually very little difference between all of them. So in my view, it actually doesn't support changing the differentials for commercial and industrial at this stage. Also, I just wanted to highlight that indexation causes this 5% increase in residential, but not uniformly and across all suburbs, which means that some residential properties will go up by 5% and others will not be going up at all, which will cause a slight redistributive effect of the rate burden, meaning that those property values for residential that have gone up a wee bit more, they'll pay a little bit more in rates for 26-27 than the others. Now that's something that there's nothing we can do about that, but as we said, on average, it's 2.89%.
2.6. You've included primary production into the residential, right?
Yes.
So they get a discount.
So primary production, sorry, these are valuation increases.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm trying to say is when you actually do the rates, residential and primary production are incorporated into the residential sector, right? We've had a 5% increase there, but only a 2.89. Commercial and industrial, right? You've got them into one category, right? So it mightn't be much, but the people in the commercial sector are actually paying for people in the industrial. So maybe what we should be doing is splitting them and splitting the other two as well, irrespective of how many we have in primary production or how many we have in industrial. The original intent was so that the residential sector didn't have to wear the burden, but when there's changes like that, why should primary production be benefiting from the residential sector, and why should the industrial section be benefiting from commercial? So I think we should need to break down the components down to those in both those categories.
It is correct that it's exactly right what you've said. If we leave commercial and industrial in there, then there is going to be a redistributive effect within commercial and industrial. However, basically I'm not proposing changing the differentials. So what it means is the amount of revenue that we're going to continue taking from commercial and industrial and residential won't change. So the pie won't change. We'll still take the same amounts of money for each, but within commercial and industrial, some will pay more and some will pay less, purely because of their valuation. So it means that industrial properties will pay more of the pie that's within commercial and industrial, but this doesn't impact commercial because residential, because we've ring-fenced these pockets of revenue.
Deputy.
Yeah, just one question on that. Did you say there's only 2 properties for the primary production?
there
So
is
that's
South
2
Hobart.
properties we're talking about that...
There is South Hobart.
Yeah, okay. And my other question was around, the purposes that you had outlined, the key purposes, and how do we go with that? Like, especially the final bit, is it tracking, just from the overview that you've said, it seems like it's tracking better, especially if the evaluation has not gone up for certain properties, and so that differential rate is actually more equitable in that sense.
Because we're keeping the pie the same, it means that each one of the land uses is still paying the same portion of rates, so we're not changing that at all. And I'm not, because of these figures, I'm actually not proposing we change that. We could change it, but I think the figures don't substantiate a change at this time, because there's very little between these land uses. So just to be clear, we're not proposing to take more money from commercial and industrial, even though their valuation increases have gone up more, and indeed industrial's gone up by more than 10%. It just means that within that land use, industrial properties will pay more because their property values are higher.
Have you got more slides to show?
Yes.
Yeah. Last question, and then we'll get through the slides.
No, I wanted to see how many more slides there were.
Oh.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, vacant residential land, so we've got a differential that's set at 2 times, so it's double the normal vacant land rate. Policy objective when setting it, which was prior to 2024, which encouraged development, discouraged land banking, and support housing supply. You can see the way the differential is actually working. So in 2023, when we adopted it, 488 properties, that went down 449 in 2025, and 430 currently. And of the 430, 20 of these have the required, planning, building, and permits in order to be developed. So they're underway. So that takes you down to 410. So I do feel the differential is having a really good impact on this one, your existing policy setting. Short stay visitor accommodation. So it applies to residential. So this is land classified as residential. Used for the commercial purpose of short stay visitor accommodation. It's set at 2 times or double the residential land rate. So you remember the conversation on the differentials. The policy objective is to ensure housing stock is retained and commercial use contributes to the provision of council services. So you remember that we have set the differential higher for commercial because they benefit from more council services than residential does. So R7, but they're using it for a commercial purpose.
Sorry, can I ask a question with that one? I like the numbers you had before, the finite numbers of the property, the unused land. With this one, we don't have that, and I appreciate it's probably because we have extra ones coming on board, and at the same time we have other losses. Would we be able to probably later on get the numbers, if you don't mind?
In 2025, from memory, so I apologise if I have these wrong, 488. July 2025, 568. Currently at April, 600. Today, 604.
So we've actually reduced the acceleration. That's what you're saying.
Yes, and I've got slides which will show that as well.
That's right.
We might just hold I appreciate your question, thank you. We might just hold off on the questions till we get through the presentation.
Yep.
So just bank your questions for a bit.
And approximately 50% are long-term lease, 50% are owner-occupied of those that now be handed back to residential use. We need additional data, and the reason why we do is because the Valuer General has only just made his way through evaluating to R7 all these properties, so we need a little bit more data. This is a slide that shows the permit applications. So this is visitor accommodation applications. The dark blue applications lodged with the city. The orange is the ones that we have approved. And as you can see from 22-23, they've declined. So the number of applications lodged with the city has been decreasing, and the percentage approved has been declining. So it goes from 86 to 84 to 64 to 63. So you can see this working. In terms of housing rental availability, I'm taking this from the Real Estate Institute of Tasmania, and specifically the report that was attached. And you can see it sort of plateaued down in sort of, around that COVID period, and has been going up and has slightly declined. As of June 2025, that the vacancy rates for Hobart were down at 1.8%. Rental affordability, we know this is taken from the Tenants Union of TAS, and in the south we know that rental affordability has gone up. So this one shows, you might recall we tried to benchmark the commercial rates against the what a similar property would look like. So what I've done is I've just looked at what would happen if we did increase the differential. So the top table shows short stay visitor accommodation. I've randomly taken $1 million property and a $1.5 million. So these are short properties used for the entire use of short stay. 2 times the general rates shows that it would be $4,500 they would pay, 6.7 if you had a property 1.7, and I've shown how it would go up if the differential was made higher. Then I've also showed in the second table what would happen to residential properties, because remember this is residential and short stay are the same land use. And as you see, as you increase short stay, the residential properties start to decline, but because there's so many residential properties, you're not seeing a huge difference or a huge, residential rates coming down. And just to show you that if we run the numbers again, and bearing in mind these numbers are draft at the moment, almost final, for a 1 and 1 of a property that's used for either C52 or C51, so that's your bed and breakfast, your boarding houses, those types of properties, you can see what the amount of rates would be. And of course we were aiming to, I guess, to benchmark those two figures. So I guess just back on that, if we do increase it, it does become a bit out of step with commercial. So the differential level, really importantly, the differential level for short stay is having an impact on intended policy outcomes that the city sets. 23% of properties have returned to the residential market. Rates are a form of taxation, so it's really important for fairness and equity in considering the level of the differential. Any differential is taken into consideration, and more information on that was in the original strategy. Importantly, each differential must have a clear attribute of the land, a defined policy intent, and a proportionate relationship to that intent. So when thinking about making changes to the differentials, that's what we have to make sure of. Doing a dip dive on service rates and charges. We currently have service rates and charges. Rates are the amount you pay varies by your property valuation. Charges are fixed. The reason we have fixed charges for waste and FOPO is that because we can actually say that each property is getting a similar service, whereas for the ones we fix by valuation, they're not sort of serviced in that way, and properties do get different levels of service. Deep dive on stormwater. It's not a uniform or discrete service, and the costs and the impact do vary by property value, scale, and impervious services, and location and connection to infrastructure. So it is considered that valuation-based service rates best reflect the benefit and the impact for that. As part of the review, we did do a deep dive in the stormwater rebate. So 547 of our properties currently receive a rebate. So that means they don't pay the stormwater removal service rate. Historically, they've been granted where practical connection is not possible with the Urban Drainage Act, and the majority of those properties are rural, fringe, or they have really steep locations. However, of those 547, 169 are separately titled car parks. They're all in urban areas. In fact, there's a whole bunch down in the Salamanca area. Separately titled, so they're not part of an existing property. Separately titled. They're located in urban areas. They generate stormwater runoff, and they rely on our infrastructure and flood mitigation, and they benefit from public stormwater management. And so it's proposed that those properties should pay the stormwater removal service rate. So that's a recommendation that we'd like to take forward. So the outcome, the strategy is operating broadly as intended. It continues to align with taxation principles, and as I said, we're not proposing to amend the pie for 2026-27. The rate burden remains consistent with Council's adopted policy intent when you approved the strategy. The feedback was actioned already with the changes to the maximum percentage increase cap, but we have identified some improvement opportunities, and that's in relation to stormwater and having that clearer policy intent and making sure that's fair as to who pays that rate. Some improved policy alignment for short stay in terms of remissions. That's just making it a little clearer, I think, in our policy documents. And considering, which will come in 2028, the pathway for further unwinding the rates cap, which we're relying on. And the last slide is the charitable rates exemption. So, did a deep dive on this, and this is provided under Section 87 of the Local Government Act. So it's the general rate exemption that is in that. It's legislative. We don't have discretion over this. We don't. We're required under legislation to provide it. If people, the only part of the rates that they don't pay is the general rate, still pay service rates and charges. In order to qualify for it, the property has to be owned and operated, so it has to meet two parts of that exclusively for charitable purpose. Council has a policy on it which clearly defines what charitable purpose is, which is linked to the Charities Act 2013. We have 170 properties that currently have it. It's gone slightly down since we last spoke, to 5.8 million. It's 0.68. Now, what I decided to do is to actually just break this down. So the people that are getting, the organisations that are getting, 27 of the 170 are commercial. Most of those are offices or shop fronts with Cancer Council, Dogs Home, Salvation Army, Hobart City Mission. 90 are public enterprise, and that's where all of that is. I just wanted to highlight a Supreme Court decision that was made in 2019, which is why these have gone up the way they have in the last 10 years. And that Supreme Court decision affected independent living units, but then also did affect student accommodation. So the number of properties we were required to reassess and now get that because of that Supreme Court decision went up, and that is why. So public enterprise, of course, you've got your churches, you've got your schools, you've got the university. 45 residential, so we're looking at housing that's low cost housing, house, Salvation Army, Property Trust, some sport and rec, and some vacant land. So that is the end of this. We're looking for feedback so that we can provide input to the rates resolution.
Okay, we've got a lot of hands up here. We're going to start here with Alderman Zuko because he's got to flee soon. Then we'll go John and Ben.
Just, I noticed the comment there on the policy changes to short stay. 23% of properties are returned to the residential market. Could I get a breakdown of those 23% of houses that have gone from short stay to residential if there's been a change of ownership? I'm only saying that because in Victoria and New South Wales, there's been 23,000 houses sold from the rental market. It's gone into the housing market, and like if people think that all of a sudden some young person's going to be in the housing market, I assure you a lot of those will be out of their price range. So that's what's happened there. I'm just curious to know whether or not people have decided to get out of the short stay and sell their property completely and reinvest like they're doing at the moment in New South Wales and Victoria, in reinvesting in Queensland. Because if you start looking at the differences between investing in Tasmania, Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland, your return on investment in Queensland is absolutely about between 3 and 4% better than any of the other 3 states. So I'd like to know that breakdown as well. I also would like to know the breakdown of the 90 public enterprises and the 27 commercial enterprises. Because I'm really interested to know, there's 27 commercial enterprises, are they commercially getting a return? And if they are, well...
So I can quickly answer that one. They're not, in order to be qualified for the charge of rates exemption, they have to show that they're not profit making. And we actually go out and have a look at
not
property.
profit making, okay, yeah,
So it's like, you know,
I know how to make a
Council
business not
Council.
profit making, don't worry about that, it's nice and easy. Vacant land, my accountants will do a great job on it
Typical
too.
Italian.
Vacant land, sorry?
Typical Italian, I said.
Yeah,
Can we
typical Italian.
keep it to the agenda?
And the last thing is vacant land. Now, I know it's not a lot of money, but why are we given rebates for vacant land for organisations, right? Now, we're charging anyone else for vacant land to get them to develop. The more we keep on giving rebates, irrespective of who they are, the more they're going to just sit on that vacant land.
So just to clarify, they pay 2 times the vacant land rate, but then if they can show us that they're developing the land, so they have to have all the required permits, then the rate goes back to the vacant land, the normal vacant land rate, and then the moment the property is built, it gets revalued again, but this time it's revalued with whatever improvements on it. So all that the rebate does is take them back to the ordinary vacant land rate because the land is under development.
Okay, all right. Anyway, I'd like that information, please. Thank you.
Okay, we've got Councillor Kelly, then Councillor Ben, and then Councillor Ryan. I'm just conscious of the time here. We're approaching the second hour, and we've got an hour to go after that, where we have 2 more things to get through.
Can I just ask you to use that titles, Chair?
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry.
Just consistently.
Yes, okay, Councillor Lohberger,
Thank you.
after John, Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Lara. First up front, I acknowledge this is probably one of the hardest jobs on council, to all these different ways we can silo things and break it down and do all that. So up front, I acknowledge it's a tough job and no one's ever going to be happy. That being said, it's easy for us to tear it apart. Just following on before we get from Councillor Alderman Zuko about some of these organisations that are some very well-paid fat cat people on charitable organisations that do very, very well out of these. And I'm not saying everyone, but once again, I suppose this highlights my comment I just made. Well, how do you break those down and all that? You could.
Sorry, Councillor Kelly, I reckon that's a bit beyond what we're discussing here.
Two things. One is that, I've got vacant land and developing it as a natural greenlands area, planting trees, trying to do the right thing for the environment. I'm getting wrapped up for that. So just one comment. It's probably not going to...
Not about you, though.
Submissions and all that. Absolutely not. And I've said it before and I'll say it one more time. All commercial leases that I've ever been involved in on receiving end or handing out invoice ends, the rates are just headed straight back on. There's the rates, mate, you pay them. Most people pay them directly too, or I pay and then just bill them. So it does sift down to the mum and dad show in the hole in the wall coffee shop. They get whacked on there, So I don't think we should ever lose sight of that. And it's not just the greedy landlord taking it and making an extra profit on it. And in fact, you've got to produce the invoice to the tenant to say it. So there's no 10% charge on top of that just for the hell of it as well. So I'd just like to lay those couple of points there.
Thanks, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Lohberger, followed by Councillor Posselt.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the remissions or the sort of the return to housing stock, to residential from the permit properties. Just, I mean, sort of attributing it all to the policy, I'm just wondering if that's maybe not the right way to go, given it was just the first year or two of this differential rating. I mean, how meaningful is it as a sign that properties are being returned, as opposed to simply indicating the number of the permits that have not really been taken up, and there are actually people living in that property and not renting it out? So it's sort of it's a big step to say that the policy has led to this outcome, when I suspect what's happened is a lot of people have got their rates bill and say, oh, hey, we're living in it, we don't need to pay this. So I just wondered how it is that we could differentiate that. I mean, was there a really big number in the first? I mean, can we get the numbers perhaps of the people who have changed that rating immediately after receiving their first ratings bill under the new differential? Because I'd suggest those people haven't actually changed the rules. They've just indicated to us that they've not taken up the permit. And it is good for giving us a clearer picture of who's using the permit and who isn't. But just attributing it to returns as a result of the policy, especially in that first year, I do sort of question that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And like it's a good, I think I put in one of my slides that, you know, there's more future data that we really need.
Yeah.
The value in general has only just completed, and there's still, you know, we had 4 come through in the last where we converted them to, and I think you're seeing a mixture of, you know, people who are not using the properties, even though they're permitted and haven't been using them. In terms of the statistics, it's 126 properties that have applied to us to say that the properties are no longer being used for short stay. It's about 50%. It's roughly 50-50 for long-term rentals, but I think we just need more, I guess, more data in order to provide a trend, because
qualitative.
I haven't got.
Yep.
That's right. And the only other thing I've got is people who've spoken with the rates team and myself about it, or when they've actually put their application through to us saying that, you know, they have made a conscious decision not to, you know, particularly people who have done it in the last sort of year.
Yeah.
And consciously made that decision. So we've got that empirical information as well.
My feeling is they've paid the differential rate a few times and then suddenly told us, oh, we're not doing it. They're the ones that maybe are converting. But I don't think it'd be all, particularly that first year. I think there's a huge chunk of people who are like, oh, yeah, we'd better contact the council. I think that was my main question. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. I've got 4 things, and I'll start with just the short stay stuff that Councillor Lobo mentioned. I recently found out, or had it reported to me, that there is a workaround to get around our rate system, which is leasing your property to a family member and then still putting it on short stay. And I think that officers, if I'm hearing that in the community, I think you guys should take that on board and maybe have a think about whether or not that's actually happening.
So you have to prove and provide evidence of a residential tenancy.
Yeah, so if you're giving you a lease agreement though, and you've leased it to your sister, but your sister's not actually in there, she's just signed the paperwork to say, yeah, I'm leasing this property, and then it's still going on short stay, I'm being told in the community that that's happening.
Thank you for your...
That would get picked up through our AI regulation.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
that's what I thought, but I just thought I would flag that. So the other 3 elements to discuss for me was stormwater, rate versus fixed fee. I still feel that, and I've read your report, I still feel that stormwater is a service and should be treated as a fee, because it's not a tax. We're delivering a piece of infrastructure in order to remove water from premises. And so if you have, say, an apartment block with 30 apartments in it and they have a small roof area, that they're charged a stormwater service fee based on the capital value of their apartment, and the capital value of their apartment is higher than a standalone house in Newtown, they're going to pay a higher stormwater service fee than the house in Newtown that contribute some apartments. You could only contribute no stormwater whatsoever, but obviously a small percentage of the roof. I'm just not convinced that having it as part of the rates, as a function of the capital value of the property, is a fair and just way to deliver that system, which I've said before, and I think it's worth saying again. And that brings me to it was a bit alarming that the car park stuff hasn't been picked up. It's great it's been picked up now, but they're probably the worst for stormwater management is a giant section of asphalt in terms of the burden on the system. But the problem therein lies that we have a capital value rating system. A car park's capital value is inherently low if it's a surface lot, and so even then they're contributing terrible amounts of stormwater into our system and still not paying their fair share because their capital value is so low. So it's a little bit problematic, I think, with the stormwater service fee versus charge, and I still think that it should be a fixed fee. The two to go, Chair, which leads to car parks nicely. So I had hoped that the council would consider around the table how we can better use differentials, which can be land, can be use, as we've discovered with short stay. But like to set an example again, the capacity to pay from a commercial surface lot car park, let's just say Montpellier Retreat as an example, they've got massive capacity to pay. All of the taxation principles say they should be paying more, but because they only have asphalt in their building, their capital value is low. So they inherently pay less rates than they should contribute based on what the site's earning, because we're on a capital value system. If we're on a land value system, they will be paying exorbitantly more than they are. So I had hoped that our differential system would look to that to even the playing field and say, well, yeah, we've gone to capital value. However, a car park in the centre of town is not really what we want, contributes massively to stormwater issues, and they have really large capacity to pay, so why aren't they paying a differential to bring them closer to what a developed site would look like from a value perspective? And that's a bit of a nuance of capital value versus land value rating. I'm not sure if that's just feedback.
Yeah, we haven't got time for dialogue, I don't think.
We've only got an hour left, so
yeah, I know, but this,
we need to keep moving.
We only get to do this twice in the term to talk about rates. So and it's like a key thing.
It's like all these workshops. We only get limited time.
It's never the end of the story of the workshop, though. You can always engage with us outside of workshop settings.
Yeah.
So.
And the other element was commercial vacant land. We have put in residential vacant land differential to disincentivise land banking. Land banking is probably more prevalent in the commercial part of town where land is worth more. Should we not be considering having a differential rate on commercial vacant land that's the same as residential for 2 times?
And thank you for your question. We previously looked, there's very few car parks are rated as commercial, even if they don't have any only lines marked on them, they're still considered commercial properties that pay the higher commercial rates with the 221 differential. The number of properties that we have that are vacant commercial or vacant industrial is so few, and when we did a deep dive on them, they can't actually currently be developed. So
they can't.
No, it would be difficult to. I think we've had a look, and there's very few of them. But I can certainly follow up with the information.
Thanks. That'd be great. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We've got Councillor Dutta, we've got Councillor Kitsos, and then we've got Alderman Bloomfield.
Just one question.
And just be conscious, keep looking at the clock up there, okay?
Yeah, mine is always very short, to the point. Thank you so much for that. I think a lot of work I endorse what Councillor Kelly has said. My question is, with regards to rates for the residents for the coming year. It is my understanding, due to family commitments, I wasn't able to come to the workshop. But it's 3.5, is it right? Is it possible at this stage to suggest a 3.3 or no, it's too late?
I would suggest it's too late, given that we started in November and a lot of planning has been geared around that and will be substantially lower than the CPI as it's currently running, and probably the lowest rate increase in Tasmania Council, I would suggest. So I would be reluctant to want to shift on that at this late stage.
Thank you, Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. I think the stormwater and the car parks, yes, absolutely. I wouldn't mind seeing the 2.5% fee differentiation for short stay accommodation to really see an impact on returning those properties to the market. I'm wondering whether someone in the organisation might consider the opportunity to run a survey, an exit survey for people who are notifying us that they're no longer using it for short stay, just to ask them why, what was the change. I'm sure we've got some very clever people who can word that in a way that would add a qualitative perspective to the data that we were hoping to get over the next few years in that particular space. And I just wanted to ask a question around the cost of living crisis that we're all experiencing at the moment, and if there's anything else council can and should be doing in this space within our rates to make sure that we're not putting too much pressure on family households.
Thank you. That's a great question. So we've still got our financial hardship assistance policy, and under that there's various things that we can do to support people. Interestingly, we're not seeing an increase or an uptick in the number of financial hardship applications coming through the city at this stage, but it remains something that we're committed to offering, and we are proactive when people are having difficulty paying their rates, then explaining what we've got there.
Yeah, great. I think just making sure that we keep up to date with the practices during these particularly hard times, paying in instalments and interest-free repayments and whatever that we have available to us to make sure that people can meet their responsibilities, but we're being reasonable as well.
Thank you.
Okay, right, I've got a couple of questions. With the short stay change of use, I can tell you that I've been contacted by a number of the representatives from short stay accommodation, and they are looking at going legal on Hobart City Council as an example for the $5,000 change of use fee. So we are treading dangerous ground if we decide to change from the 200 to anything further. So I would suggest that we be very careful just exactly what we attend to if we're looking at changing the rating for short stay. The other thing was that I was just kind of curious, with the public enterprise, that's effectively all the government organisations, isn't it? Yeah, but how come they get such a big discount? Like they're 168 versus 200, even though they're effectively a form of commercial enterprise in some regard, I suppose, if you want to argue it that way.
Yes.
I'm just wondering whether or not, because that is effectively government grant funding that's actually paying the rates, whether or not we could actually lift a little there to take a little bit of pressure off elsewhere. Because right now we need to make choices that actually support small business, that support ratepayers, the ones that are struggling with these high interest rates. Certainly that part of our community not necessarily have interest rates to pay because that's not their business model. So we could shift a little bit of the pain around. I'm not saying substantial. I'm not talking about let's whack it up 300 units, something like that. I'm just saying that perhaps that should be a long-term goal, that we actually start to morph that one up over time. That could just help a little. And I appreciate too seeing how you showed us the documented sharing of the free rates. That was really good, thank you. Because that actually alleviated my fears that small business was actually funding those, and now I know that they're not. That's great. But it also highlighted too for me that there's this whole substantial element there that we could actually be effectively asking state government to tip a bit more into the coffers, just gently over a period of time. So that could be something else we could look at as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your effort tonight. Great effort, well done. I think we all understand rates a bit better now. Much appreciated. Okay, we're going to move on to item 8.1, which is a presentation on wildfire house loss hazard mapping from Professor David Bauman and Dr. Grant Williamson. If you'd like to come up and take the chair. And special appearance by Sean Blake. Over to you guys.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Sean Black, Manager for Open Space, and I'll be introducing the next couple of workshop items. But I thought just for a little bit of context, I think it's really important to talk about how much land the City of Hobart manages in terms of bushland and how that relates to fire mitigation and management. So we have about 4,500 hectares of bushland in the city, and we have a lot of our surrounding neighbourhoods adjacent to that bushland. So we listened to the conversations around the LA fires, so I think everyone understands that bushfire and bushfire risk to Hobart is really important. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Grant Williamson and Professor Bowman and their project around wildfire house loss hazard mapping.
Yeah, so it's actually quite interesting, everything that's been talked about. So evacuations, if they're done early, will work. If they're done late, a lot of people will die. But the problem of evacuations is that houses burn down. In fact, we've recently done a study. The United States, the house loss ratio to every fatality is about 3 times. So a policy that is based around evacuation is committing to destruction of houses. And that has obvious implications for a council, for a housing crisis, and for insurance. The insurance industry knows this, and the insurance industry is extremely sensitised. So don't assume the insurers are coming to save you, they're not. So what are you going to do about it? Work that we've been doing shows that the standard rule of 100 metres from 1 hectare of forest is actually okay until it's catastrophic fire weather. We've looked at what happened in 1967, reconstructing house loss patterns, and we know that 100 metres is insufficient. Okay, so in other words, you've got a whole lot of houses in Hobart that are in the wrong place. What are you going to do about it? Now, there's lots of other problems with those houses. They're not bell rated, they've got the wrong gardens. But what are you going to do about it? Well, a simple thing you can do is to, rather than moving the houses away from the hazard, you can move the hazard away from the houses. And how are you going to do that? Well, you're going to do that in a combination of ways, but there's certainly the work we've done with the council is that you can use thinning, not only of the understory but also of the overstory. You can then create an environment that's much easier to manage with fire. Council has started doing this, but respectfully it's a pinprick. We're talking about the whole city on the table here that could be really severely harmed. You've got to understand that. And the amount of fuel treatment that's being done is not going to save the city. It might save a few houses. So the question, and which Grant will address, is a very simple question. How much thinning and burning fuel management, intensive fuel management? And I want to remind you that when was the last time you drove along a road and complained about the road, how much it cost? You just don't think about how much roads cost. Well, guess what? You're going to have to start thinking about fire breaks as just a fact of life that you will pay for, because if you don't pay for them, you're not going to have an insurable city, right? Doesn't matter about evacuations, it doesn't matter about anything, it just means you don't have a real estate market. I'm being blunt. So Grant will now hand over, and we've done some calculations to think about the sort of costings that you're up for to try to retrofit a city. So I'll hand over to Grant.
Yeah, thanks, David. So just to put some framing for what I'm going to be talking about here in a technical sense, house loss is driven potentially by 3 distinct factors. You've got direct flame contact, flames from vegetation actually up against the walls of your house. Put that aside for what I'm going to talk about. That's part of some of the broader projects we've got at the Fire Centre, looking at garden design and so forth. We're going to be focusing here on 2 more long-distance hazards to houses: radiant heat, radiation coming from burning vegetation in the proximity, potentially causing windows to break, allowing embers to ingress and so forth, and firebrand or ember attack. This is the main factor in Australia for house loss. Long-range embers from vegetation, maybe a few hundred metres away, potentially many kilometres away, under extreme fire danger, under high winds, landing in houses, landing in gutters, causing the loss of the house. We're going to be focusing on the radiant heat and the firebrand or ember impact here. So as David alluded to, in Australia, zoning or overlays for looking at bushfire-prone land is done in a fairly simple way. It's usually just about drawing a 100-metre distance from high-risk vegetation, from forest, for example. It is fine-tuned beyond that. We've spoken to the TFS about how they do this in practice. They make that 100-metre buffer fit to property boundaries. They look at individual bits of vegetation and make decisions, but broadly they are drawing a line on the map, 100 metre from vegetation. If you're inside that, then you were in a bushfire-prone land or bushfire-prone area. There are some problems with this. We know that actual risk from vegetation, from forests, varies a lot with the topography. Are you on a slope? Are you upslope or downslope from the vegetation? Are you next to a very dense wet forest like you might see at Ferntree or Ridgeway, or next to a dry forest or a grassland? What sort of fire weather do you get in your city typically? So that 100 metre, while it works pretty well, it doesn't capture anything. And it doesn't really look at the effect of firebrands coming from longer distances. That 100 metre bushfire prone land and the BOW ratings are mostly about direct radiant heat from the forest, not embers coming from long distances. So what we've tried to do in this project is put together better statistical models of both radiant heat and ember attack or firebrand attack from the Tasmanian vegetation. The radiant heat model, we applied the same algorithm that the TFS uses in planning their fuel break widths to work out how far should a house be from vegetation to be safe under BOW rating based on the topography, the slope, vegetation and so forth. And we did a significant amount of modelling of ember transport, which I haven't included slides on the details here, but it's essentially taking a slice of land. We used Taruna, a three-dimensional scan of it, modelled under a variety of different wind, fire danger, forest fuel load conditions, how far embers would go into the urban area. And from that can build up a statistical model saying for a given level of fire danger, for a given type of vegetation, how far from that forest interface is a house safe and how far would it be at risk. We then applied that across the Greater Hobart area. What I'm going to show you here are actually results both for the City of Glenorchy and the City of Hobart, and we've also actually done Kingston as well as part of our project with the RACT, which you'll hear about later. And we wanted to see how do our more detailed models compare with that bushfire-prone land classification when we look at radiant heat, embers, and more importantly, what can we do to modify that? Can we target some kind of modification to the interface, some kind of modification on the edge around high-risk houses? What happens if we take 25 or 50 extra metres and modify that vegetation? How much can we reduce the hazard? Now I'm going to just quickly talk about the term hazard here. This isn't about the sort of risk modelling that TFS does, where they try and predict which areas are most likely to be hit by bushfires. This is about saying if you were next to vegetation, assuming at some point that could burn, are you going to have some kind of impact from it? So when I come up with some numbers later on saying that 7,000 houses or 9,000 houses are under hazard, that's not talking about one single event. That's not saying a fire is going to take out 9,000 houses. That's saying that somewhere along the interface there is a risk to 9,000 houses at some point. So we looked at a few different scenarios, and here's where those numbers come in. On the far left bar there, this is if we used a severe fire danger rating, in effect forest fire danger index of 65, how many houses in these two local government areas would be considered at hazard from embers and radiant heat? And we get a number about 8,000. And then we did a few different scenarios. We said, well, what if we did fuel treatment in the forest? Those are the dark bars, if we reduce the fuel load around those houses deeper into the forest. And what happens if we targeted specific high-risk houses, found the most high-risk ones, and shifted that vegetation back 25 or 50 metres? And that's as we progress down, 0, 25, 50. And what we found that if we combine fuel treatments, prescribed burning, hazard reduction, mechanical thinning, with that a 25 metre buffer increase around those houses, we reduce that exposure in the interface by 40%. We're now down to about 5,000 houses. If we did a 50 metre buffer, we reduce it by 70%. And it's important to remember, and David might want to talk about this again, by a buffer or increasing the distance, we're not talking about land clearing, we're not talking about bare earth, we're talking about managing that vegetation in a different way to reduce the radiant heat from it, to reduce the embers produced from it along that urban edge. What this looks like for the Hobart local government area, we've highlighted in orange there the high risk interfaces we've identified that you could add 25 or 50 metres to, and the total amount of land in hectares, just for some scale there, that would be caught within that 25 or 50 metre interface shift.
Have you got a figure just for Hobart rather than Hobart and Glenorchy? Is it about half or?
It is about half. I can calculate that quite easily, but yes, I can get that to you.
And our current fuel break program clears, Sean, how much do we treat each year?
170 hectares.
170.
170.
I think that's...
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That was it? That was your presentation? Okay. Yep. No, I just expected lots of slides. Okay, cool.
We were told so.
Yep, excellent. Okay, we'll start off with Ben. Sorry, Councillor Lohberger.
Thank you, Councillor Hartley.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lohberger.
Thanks for the presentation. It's lovely to be in the same room with you. I've sort of spoken to you on social media for a lot of years. Yeah, okay.
And then we've got, yep.
I had a question for you and then a couple of suggestions about what you maybe are going to suggest in your reports. The question is, how far into Hobart will be potentially ember stored? Because my understanding is it could, potentially, we could see the CBD receiving live embers, for instance, on a very windy hot day.
Oh, absolutely. And ember modelling we've done, under the right conditions, you can have embers across the river. Yep. You know, under the sort of Denali fire weather conditions.
So pretty much the whole city is potentially at risk of ember storm, or some level of ember storm. So I was going to ask whether maybe it would be helpful for us if people like you guys, the scientists, were to suggest some things to us, like maybe ember meshing gutters in places that aren't up on the boundary there. Because people just have got no idea. You go around, I think if you flew a drone over the CBD, you find a lot of full gutters full of rubbish. So I was just wondering if that's something you guys are thinking about recommending, some sort of ember storm protection for areas that aren't intuitively at risk.
Well, that's right. I think the really key point with our ember modelling, we used a supercomputer, it's constrained, but the key point is what number is a dangerous number of embers, and we just used a practical density. Now, the fact of the matter is, one firebrand landing in the right place can burn your house down.
Yeah.
But the key point is that there is a very strong decay function. So, thinking about gardens and houses and things like ember guards, very, very sensible in probably, a kilometre. I'd say a kilometre, and then in many parts because of the constrained nature of Hobart, that goes all the way down to the sea.
Yep.
Because the fact of the matter is Hobart is a notoriously dangerous setting. But what I guess I'm trying to convey is you can look at this and toss in the towel and just go, wrong city in wrong place. Or you can actually start doing things where you can really increase your chances of reducing, because what we haven't talked about, the elephant in the room, is LA is house-to-house ignitions. So once you get house-to-house ignitions, that's actually a wildfire that's become an urban conflagration. We don't want that to happen,
And historically, we haven't seen those in Australia again.
We haven't, but everybody in the game is, like there was a fire conference here a couple of weeks ago, no coincidence that there was somebody from Moody's. There are people who are really, the risk analysts and the insurers are aware that these conflagrations are a thing, right? So we don't exactly know there's much we need to learn about. But what I guess I'm trying to say is you can focus on the negatives, but you can actually start weighting the dice in the other direction and saying, well, if we're willing to put a bit of investment into this, we can drastically increase the odds of not even having a problem. And then you start getting all of these virtuous cycles spinning up, particularly because we know that about 50% of people aren't going to evacuate early, so there's going to be all sorts of chaos, people going to places of last resort. And then even if there is a very successful mass evacuation, what do you do with all these people with no livelihoods, no home, no nothing? So really weighting the odds to make house survival, and you know, there are other things we could talk about with the evacuations and fire shelters and so on. But I think if, you know, yep, we can do mass evacuation, we can do it, we can mandate it, we can save a lot of people's lives. They just won't have a house. That's a certainty. And so how do we actually upregulate that? And at the current situation, it is just completely crazy what's going on around here. It's just nuts.
I agree.
And you've got to do something about it. I'm finding it difficult to live with myself, knowing the existential risk.
I guess one bit of advice I could give is that a room of people like this is looking to a couple of guys like you for advice on what we can do. And we will probably listen to you more closely than a lot of other people. And I have one other question, which might even be for Sean. It was about house-to-house ignition. In the Canberra fires in 2003, an entire street was saved by one family who rigged themselves up with eye protection, walkie-talkies, breathing gear, and they saved their house, and then the neighbour's house started burning, and they realised they had to save that to save their house, and they ended up saving the whole street because it was going to be going to go like dominoes. And so I guess that's maybe something else that we as a council could be suggesting to communities, that if you can rig your family unit up with stuff like this, you have a chance of survival. And I think people particularly forget eye protection. You look at 1967 and the aftermath, hundreds of people with badly injured eyes from embers flying into them. And once you get one of them, you're blind in a bushfire. So there's a few things there that we're just not aware of, I think. I used to live on the countryside. I had to do all this stuff myself. And you come into the city and you think, wow, I can see gutters full of rotten leaves and it'll be dry in summer and whatnot. So yeah, my final comment would be that we would be looking to you guys to give advice to us, and we'll see what we can do. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Lohberger, Lord Mayor, and then Alderman Bloomfield. And if we just look at that, haven't got much time.
Sorry, everyone.
Thanks. Obviously, we had a lot of contact, so I don't want to dominate the discussion, but I'm just trying to get your current. What's new about your current research? Is it literally that? I mean, because this report that we just signed off on does say that research shows that 85% of homes lost in bushfires are located within 100 metres of nearby bushland.
Yep.
And the work we're doing with RACT, which we'll hear about later, is to really start our work around that 100 metres to try and improve the their gardens and their ember protection and these sort of things. There are constraints with money, even though you say, spend as much as you do on roads, on bushfire. But, I mean, are you saying that basically our current fuel break, which is the one the TFS mandates, ideally would go from 170 hectares that we treat every year now to around about 400 hectares. So roughly doubling our fuel break treatments around our bushfire-prone suburbs would be a good first step.
Yeah, but also doing much more intensive work in the bush. So these are not like bare earth fuel breaks. These are
no, but our fuel breaks are quite.
Yeah, but thinning, that vision thing of the picture, the thinning and the burning, trying to get, we can call them green fire breaks, green halos, marsupial lawns, whatever you want to call it. But the feature of them is there are no ladder fuels, so it's extremely difficult for the fire to get into the tree crowns. Yes. The tree crowns then start doing really useful work by being blotters and giving resistance to the wind and stopping the embers. So tree crowns, random tree crowns burning, it doesn't bother me. But when you've got ladder fuels and when you go for a dog walk, just look at the ladder fills. That's a connection between these piles of leaf litter, shrubs,
Yeah.
and then into the ground.
But if we,
That is just going to explode
Yeah.
into a towering inferno.
but if as a practical first step out of this discussion, we asked for an estimate from our staff of the cost of
Yes.
going from 170 hectare fuel break program per year to a 400 hectare
Sure.
per year fuel break system, which would
Yep.
mean they're wider and they're perhaps more, and ask for the cost of that, would that
That's
be a
a start.
useful start?
And then you'll
Yeah.
Because
very
the cost will
quickly-
be expensive, but
Yes.
it's good to,
You-
yeah, as you say, it's
you'll-
really important.
And
You'll
having
see
a
the
cost,
deficiencies.
having a cost like that would be something really useful to put into our modelling, because part of the important part of what makes it different from the 100-metre rule is simply that we can test scenarios, we can focus on specific areas, identify high risk clusters of houses and so forth. So having those sort of economic numbers to put into it would be the logical next step.
And can I just check why you have moved from that 100 metre, because that 100 metre rule is kind of nationwide.
Yeah.
Well, I could explain that. So, I mean, basically, where did the 100-metre rule come from? What's the paper? I can tell you.
Natural hazards.
That people have done a few post hoc analyses of house loss patterns. But what we're noticing is, and we've just recently finished a study, we haven't published yet, in 67 fire, but in New South Wales, under catastrophic fire weather conditions, it's a completely different profile. So in other words, it's not a criticism of the experts who cooked up the 100-metre rule. It's a pretty good rule. And that's actually pretty reassuring, that it's a good planning thing. It's just that because we're in a different world now, the likelihood of catastrophic fire weather means that we've got this much longer tail, I suppose, or shadow that's now hanging over these interface suburbs. And there's a lot of work to do on those areas, obviously, but the thing which I'm saying is that we can use these sorts of planning things, plus other grants, been working with somebody who's got a very, very powerful system to calculate out the most effective prescribed burning. And then you get into these virtuous cycles that you're suddenly able to do effective prescribed burning in vegetation you couldn't prescribe burn because it's too dangerous, it's too thick. And you can start looking at these scenarios, as you say, and then you can, it's just design, it's design principles. And it's just sitting there waiting, we've got to wake up and do this or we're going to see something very bad happen. That's my message.
Thank you.
Hello.
It was interesting. I guess my question was, I would really like to get to brass tacks with this, because you've obviously got a plan and a concept of exactly what needs to happen and how it must happen in this 170 metres and what this, well, I'm talking about the depth of how far this has to go. And then you've also got the fact that you have a plan and idea of exactly what needs to happen in that area as well. You've also identified how much needs to happen, but we haven't got a cost. And I think that this is probably your next piece of work, really, isn't it? But I would almost be championing to say, can we suggest a trial area that you identify, so that we can actually point and shoot and say, this is what it looks like, this is how much it costs, and because you've got two costs here. You've got the establishment cost, which is far different to the maintenance cost, and we need to know how to budget and plan for that as a council anyway. So if we had something like that to actually start working with, then we've actually got a way forward, because you've already identified from what I can see in that map, you know exactly where all these areas need to be. But we need to start somewhere and actually get that established, because the only way we can actually socialise this idea through the community and through those who need to invest to say this is what it looks like and this is how we do it. So I would like to say, and you're speaking to someone who actually had a fire that was the height of full-grown gum trees 100 metres back from my house, and it went for the fire line was probably a couple of 100 metres. The noise was extraordinary. You can't hear yourself think, and you're 100 metres away, and you can feel the heat, and you can't hear yourself talk, and it is the most frightening thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I'll never forget what that was like, and that was in winter. Some guy let his chainsaw kind of, it cuts the embers. So we were lucky it was only winter. The amount of leaf litter was like 0.5 metre, and that's all it took. And we still don't have systems in place in that particular area to actually maintain leaf litter. Not our property, I can't control it, but we have this kind of area and situation all over the place. So this is why it's so important.
Quick one. Yep. I'm just interested to hear, like we talk about buffers to property. On a coastal erosion, from a coastal erosion management perspective, we talk about retreat, but I've not heard, I think the whole time I've been on council, anyone talk about retreat from the bush in the context of fire, rather than remove the bush from the people, why aren't we removing the people from the bush? And whether or not planning reform, such as, for first example, if you're within certain zones, you're not allowed to build property anymore. Do you guys have any considerations or thoughts on that, or it's beyond your expertise?
Look, it's a land planning question, but I know that I've seen this in New South Wales. One of the many reasons councils are going for densification is for this very reason. We don't want to keep expanding our cities further and further into the bush, because that's where the problem is. And when we look at the causes of the increased fire disasters we've seen globally, it is climate change, but it's also human land use patterns.
Yep.
The urban interface has grown significantly over the same period. So
yes, you think there's there's work that's been done in that space from a land use planning, strategic planning level for us around how we could manage a retreat, or at least limit the.
I mean, retreat's difficult, but certainly limitations.
The restriction of new zone. For example, if you're on the interface with the bush, we should probably be considering the prohibition of any subdivision.
But there's another dimension to this, and that's the escape routes because there are settlements that are the escape routes actually have to go through dangerous places. So what I guess I'm more, this is adaptation now. Like, a lot of this stuff's baked in, right? It's just baked in. It's frightening, the number of properties that are off base, but also the vegetation has thickened enormously. A lot of people, when you look at the photography from 1967, the vegetation was actually quite open, and there was a big halo of sort of just wasteland around Hobart. You can see that, like Knocklofty was just, just weeds and stuff. And so that actually frightens me too, because it means that 67 is not the worst case. The worst case is what happens now, because everything's pressed in. So what we can do, I think exactly right, is the idea of some demonstration sites. We're doing that on the University Reserve, but the wet forests are really the biggie, the regrowth and the slopes of the mountain. And we've got to bring the community along with this and explain that this can be done very effectively, create the amenities, very nice amenity value. I invented a thing called the picnic rug test, which is, do you want to throw a picnic rug down? That's probably, you've got it right. But if it's just a whole lot of bush and sticks and everything, then that's not going to work. So we can have the bush, we can make it really nice. There are little examples of marsupial lawns and nice thinning projects that have been done, and we just need to, I think, do it at a bigger scale, and that is a beautiful segue to RACT, because that's what they're trying to do. And they need to talk about their vision, because it does impact. There's two sides of their vision. One is what's happening in the gardens, the other is on the interface, bushland, and they're actually hand in glove. They fit together nicely.
Thanks, David.
Yep.
Grant, you've really pressed the issue here on the urgency, I think. I'll save my comments again for the next one. But I think we'll keep moving. We get it. And we'll see where we go with the RACT discussion next, which is all about how we can activate our communities. Thank you. Much appreciated. Howdy.
Howdy, how are you?
Okay.
Right.
Want to introduce everyone?
Okay, I'd like to introduce Catherine Clark and Melinda Percival from the RACT. Who are going to present on project that is being developed in partnerships with the City of Hobart and Kimberley Council.
What was it, Melissa?
Catherine
and
Melinda.
Catherine and Mel. Okay, I'm good with names.
So this is a joint partnership project that's been built in collaboration with the City of Hobart and Kingston Council. This project is about turning our understanding of bushfire risk into that practical community-led action to help reduce and support communities.
All right, take it away.
Awesome, thank you. I'll keep this brief, just looking at time, and thanks Dave and Grant for the intro. But as they highlighted, the project we're looking at is trying to get that household and the community areas to actually start together, because as you heard from Dave, it needs to actually function as a whole. Just really quickly, who are we, why are we here? RACT, I'm hoping you've all heard of who we are. We have 223,000 members, over 70% of households have some sort of membership with us. We also own the state's largest insurance company. We insure just under a third of all Tasmanian homes. Importantly, we're a mutual. So what that means is we're kind of like a not-for-profit. We don't make money for shareholders. We make money, and that goes back in the form of benefits to members, but also in the community work we do. We bought the insurance company back fully in about 4 years ago, and our focus has been ramping up to this type of work so we can start to put back into the community the same way we've done for road safety over the past 100 years. We're starting to look into the resilience space of what we're looking at going forward. So I just thought I'd do a really quick overview of the risk that we're facing, and as you would have heard from Dave, fire is our biggest challenge. Interestingly, it is our way bigger challenge when compared globally. So if we look at Australia, fire's kind of, yeah, it's a risk and it's around, but actually flood's the biggest peril for Australia in terms of economic impact. You can see with Tasmania, we're off the scale in terms of the risk of fire. And as we've gone around the world and looked at this globally, we're actually pretty special globally. We haven't really found anyone who fits like us. So, you know, it's nice to be special. Just in terms of economics, and one of the things an insurance organisation does bring in RACT, because we're local, we're based here, we are an underwriter, so we're a fully fledged insurance company. We've got an actuarial team of about 6 very smart men who sit in our team working with us on this project, and what they bring to the table is the economic analysis to this, and how this risk aligns economically, but also back into the global reinsurance market. So you can see our economic loss from a very large bushfire is around 2.9 billion. That very large bushfire would be here economically, which is about a 7.6% of our GSP. And even though Victoria and New South Wales have a higher fire risk than us, they are much more likely to have a catastrophic bushfire because they're warmer and they're drier. Their GSP share is a lot lower. So I suppose when we look at it, we're kind of thinking the impact of our community is potentially a lot higher just because of how small we are, where we are. We're an island off a large country that's at the bottom of the world. So that's just a couple of things we sort of keep in mind when we're looking at this. So in building up this project and working with the Hobart City and the Kingborough teams, we've done a research paper recently where we went out to our base and the broader community. We got 11,000 responses back, and in those responses, over 7,000 individuals made comments. It sort of showed to us this is a really pressing issue on Tasmanians. What we found though is preparedness isn't necessarily linked to risk of the individual, which is concerning. Interestingly and importantly, Tasmanians are seeking more support, with many more of them wanting more action for the community particularly. Tasmanians are more worried about the community themselves and wanting more action and support about what they do for themselves. They want simpler information. There's a lot of information out there on how to be prepared. It's really wordy, it's quite confusing, and I think people just go, I can't comprehend this within my busy life, so they're seeking more simplicity, and they're wanting something to be done to support their community as well. So it's not just about them, there is definitely this link between the individual and the community in terms of desire. What we're focusing on in terms of the trial, the biggest focus on the trial is this defendable space. So house loss data, and this is from Dave's work, and we actually have an ongoing partnership with the Fire Centre. They're a really important partner for us. Shows that flammability reduction in that first 2 metres nearly doubles the chance of a structure surviving a fire. So one of the most effective and cheapest things we can do is help individuals reduce what is at risk in their immediate environment. House hardening is a great thing, it's wonderful, but it can cost an extraordinary amount of money. There's a lower hanging fruit, and that's this defendable space. So how do we help people look at the easiest thing we know we can do now and incentivise that? There was a project a couple of years ago called Sparking Conversations. A lot of the work we have done, I think someone mentioned it earlier, is building on the information and the findings we've found out of this and taking it to the next step. So we're focusing on this community-centric solution. What we're adding to, I suppose what Sparking Conversations focused on was integrating a reward feedback mechanism into this process. So it's being trialled overseas very successfully. Canada does it in a project called FireSmart, and the US did it in FireWise. We can't just plug and play what they do because their entire system is different. Their governance is different, how their firefighters are paid and operate are different. So, but we can take the concepts that have worked, and that's what we're starting to do here. And then we can share that task through coordinated effort. So we want people to be supported and engaged at an individual level. We want to give them the right information and motivate and incentivise them to take behaviours. But importantly, we also want to show them it's not them by themselves. So we want to do this in a streetwise pattern, but also working with Hobart City to do other things in that broader community landscape at the same time. So they might see additional green waste collections, additional verge clearing that's happening at the same time with this conversation. So it starts to be a bit more of a community element. And this is sort of the pilot summary that we're looking at. So when we're talking incentivisation, what we're talking about is we'll look at a small street. We will look at what they can do. We'll trial different streets in different ways, but it could be that it's council incentivisation, so free green waste at the tips. It might be the insurance premiums are cheaper if they undertake action. It could be that it's actually an 85-year-old lady who's living in this house, and it doesn't matter how much money you throw at her. The problem is she can't physically do the work. So what we're trying to understand is what are the motivational strings we can pull that will help incentivise individual households. So who are we doing this with is, for the phase one we're hoping will happen without additional Commonwealth funding. So phase one we're focusing on 120 households, 4 or 5 locations. We're still working that through with Dave and his team and the Tas Fire Service. And we'll also be doing this as a control group of 1,000 to 1,200 control households. That'll just get information but nothing else. The reason we're doing this is we need to do this in a scientific way so we can evidence it and go, if we scale this, it will work. And that's what we're trying to achieve. So our partners hopefully will be the City of Hobart and Canberra Council. And our key collaborators and experts are the Fire Centre, so Dave and his team, Virtual Tas, which is a 3D model of LiDAR imagery of the state, which helps us really have a detailed conversation with households. Munich Re is the world's largest reinsurer and a partner of ours, and they are supporting us with information of what are the actions we could do that would be evidence and acceptable at a global reinsurance level, because we're trying to push this through into having more affordable insurance outcomes at the end of it, and another partner of ours. So if I'm a participant, what will I see? I'll see some individual household assessments and supported by our pilot staff. So I'll get a knock on the door, I can agree to participate, I'll get an assessment similar to Sparking Conversations, and we'll do a street level engagement as well, so there's a bit of a community feel about it. The team will develop a risk ladder with really easy to follow. What are the top 3 things this household can do? Not the top 20, not the top 100, but what are the top 3? We'll develop that with the TFS. We don't want different information, we just want clearer information. Access to incentives, and we'll do that in different streets, different incentives, so we can test how effective they are. Overall, we're trying to improve the risk rating for the street of households. as in, have we lowered the underlying risk for this street of homes? And that then helps, well, for safety, for the first bit, they should be a safer street, but also insurance outcomes. Council participation is a thing they'll see, so cleats, drainouts, curb clearance, how we actually showing up. And then the outcome of this will be a more resilient community. The areas that we're looking at, so the 120 households we want to trial are being selected based on the risk, as in how that we want a high risk home because this is where it makes sense to invest. But we're also working with Dave and the team on where are the egress areas into the city for fire. So we want to focus on where are those points of the city we are most likely to see fire egress, and that's because some of the preliminary work that's come out of the Californian fires are, and it's a bit of a, I think, a theory and some research Dave and Grant are doing at the moment, is if you can help harden the outer homes on the edge of the city, you can stop the fire coming into the city. So that's why we're really keen to understand how this works on those really high-risk egress areas. So that's where we're focusing our attention in this. So that's it for us. So, and I went through that really quickly because I know you're under time pressure, so sorry. Happy for any questions.
We can run over for you.
Hi.
No one will be here, but we can run over.
But it's a really exciting piece of work. We're really excited because it's practical. It's something we can do now. We're not waiting for the next load of research. Importantly, at the same time, if we were successful, and we will be applying for DRF application, that part of that DRF would help us expand the households, but also help fund some of the trial work that Dave was talking about earlier from a landscape perspective.
All right.
I was just going to say, I think it's important to emphasise that we'll be building on the really important learnings that came from the Sparking Conversations Uniting Action project. So, adding even more value to that, 3-year project is a good thing. Also, we'll be working really closely with Sean's team, and the project really closely aligns with the Hobart Bushfire Management Strategy, and obviously working closely with the TFS to ensure that we're not contradicting any of their messaging.
Councillor Lohberger.
I'll be very sort of quick. I just wanted to talk about the council participation on this slide, so it's great it's still up, through street clean-up and curb clearance. Is that, are people about verges?
Verges, yes.
Yeah, because we gave over responsibility to homeowners for the management at some stage, so I feel like there's a bit of a slight issue there maybe.
There is indeed a crossover there, but for the use of the pilot project, I think it's worth considering doing this
No, that's great.
in those bushfire prone areas.
Yeah, it's okay. Right.
And it might not be necessarily mowing, it could be putting in succulents or something that's...
Agapanthus. No.
Fire resilient plants.
Resilient to everything.
I'll have a go. You've missed out one of your best partners, 2 of your best partners.
Oh no.
Yeah, and it's and it's really embarrassing a lot of the time. And I've been to these meetings before where people have spent millions of dollars and they've blown it, and they've said, "How do we communicate with the community?" And so, hello, we've got. I'll declare my interest. I'm the chair of Landcare Tas, and we have 260 groups and 8,500 members, and now there's 14, 15. How many Landcare groups, Mel, in Hobart?
Maybe 23, something like
Bush care groups? Yep. 23 groups. They all average about 10 to 12 people every month. Glenorchy's now got 14 groups as well, and they're all young people too. So we've got all the old people in Hobart, and all the young people are out in Glenorchy. And they work really diligently, and they work in the areas you're talking about, the urban fringe, doing their weed removal, but they're motivated. And we've got this network of people who are keen to do productive work, and they could do more if we give them the right incentives, and they're waiting to be asked, So if you want to activate the community, go through the Landcare networks first, because they've got the experience. They know how to do the thinning, which David's talking about. I'm keen to do thinning as well, where we need to do thinning. I'm keen to look at how we rehydrate the land so that our trees are healthier, so the crowns aren't drying out and having more vulnerability. I'm keen to look at where we put frog ponds, how we rehydrate the land all across Hobart where there's opportunities. But this is a generational kind of approach to things rather than a 2-year program. So nice start. Third year would be great, but in 50 years' time, we might have it under control. So we've got to work up a program that's going to be intergenerational. Some of the other opportunities is how do we get council to become really nimble when it comes to its fuel reduction program? Like, and Mel, you can answer me here. What happens when it's windy, when it's wet, and we can't do the fuel reduction burns? Do we cancel it and do it later? Or do we have a window, say 2 months, and we're all on standby? And we do those fuel reduction burns when the opportunity arises, rather than when they're scheduled, and then it rained, and we cancelled. So we didn't get as much done as we wanted to. Can you fill us in on that?
It's a bit of column A and a bit of column B there. So
Yep.
they're not sort of date scheduled, they're more season scheduled, and if we can't do it in that season, then it gets rolled over into the next season. But, you know, we're obviously facing issues with climate change and weather patterns and the like.
But say, for example, you had a 3-month window, and you said during this 3 months there will be days when we can go off and do our required work, and when those days appear, we don't say, oh, we've all got to do our normal work. We all say, okay, drop everything, we'll do it today and tomorrow, and get it done, and we can get much more done than if we just schedule X number of burns per year at various dates that half of them get cancelled. So it's just something to explore. You know, have a block of months where the work gets done versus some days where it's scheduled. What else have I got here? And the rehydration project, I'm really interested in how we catch water all the time and put it back into the ground. And that means frog ponds, you know, and they might be dry a lot of the time, but when it does rain, they've got moisture in them that lasts longer than if we don't have frog ponds, you know, or whatever the other water catchments are. But this is a big investment. It's not something we can do on this budget or the 400k you guys have dropped and the 300k that we've dropped. It's bigger than that, and therefore that funding that you're aiming for, and there's federal money available for all sorts of stuff, but they mostly want good ideas, not half-assed ideas. Like a lot of ideas come out of Tassie where they go, it's a nice idea, put that in the pile, and we don't get it. But those really strong partnerships, and I think Landcare is a good partner in this for funding leverage, as well as the university. So these partners come together, we talk to a lot of people, we're your cheer squad, you're our cheer squad. We can pull volunteers, you know, to help do work on the ground. It's not going to save us, but it's a bit closer than not engaging with a big workforce of people that are volunteers. And projects like thinning the she oaks up at the Domain is a fantastic example of how the bush care groups come together to do all that work, and it wouldn't get done necessarily without the work of volunteers up there. The only handicap we have is you're not allowed to touch the chainsaws. So you're there hacking away, which is annoying. So if we all could use our chainsaws, and everyone has a chainsaw and they run around their undies, cutting their firewood, as soon as we head off to the bush care groups, not allowed to touch the chainsaw. So we need to break down those barriers to make our volunteer workforce more effective somehow. Anyway, that'll do for now. Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you for coming in and thank you for waiting till the end of the evening, and all of the amazing work that you've done in designing this program. And just what a great team effort it's been, from including the CEO, who's been very involved, and all of your risk people, and it's such a compelling story. And I just wanted to say that I think this is actually, like, we do have world-leading fire risk, but this is a world-leading partnership that we can build on the partnership, but residents, insurance, council, science, it's not happening much anywhere in the world. In fact, insurers are just kind of running away really fast from bushfire-prone areas. But having this partnership where we really are trying to work together to reduce risk and hopefully we can bring more to the table in terms of things like other incentives for our, rates rebates for, for putting a frog pond in your backyard or, whatever it is, I don't know. But there are a couple of places like Ku-ring-gai Council which do offer rates incentives for residents. What they're not doing in Ku-ring-gai is working with the insurance company. And so I think, and the fact that you've got such an amazing brand and so many connections with people, I think it's a really exciting project for us to work with you on, and I think it'll be fantastic. And I just really hope that the federal government throws some serious money at this. But again, we've got to prove the good idea, prove the partnership, to then to get their support so that we can really scale this up at the scale it needs to be scaled at for to deal with David's recognition of the thousands of homes that we need and communities that we need to protect. So
thank you, Lord Mayor. I think it is important just to draw out where the difference is for this to have an insurer involved is that actuarial bit at the end. So it's being able to say this risk reduced, it's a recognised reduction, it's evidence-based, it will reduce the risk, and that then can flow through into insurability. It's kind of like we're trying to discover what is the flood levy look like for bushfire. And it's just not really simple. You can't just go and build something. There's lots of little things that need to come together to give you that same resilience in these areas. And it's unknown. It hasn't been resolved anywhere else, so it is really exciting. We have interest globally in what we're doing, so it is exciting. The team's excited. It's been amazing to work with Hobart City and bring Dave's team guiding us along the way. So it's great to have a Tassie focus on a solution for ourselves.
Yes, thanks. Where do we start? As you mentioned before, it's like eating an elephant, I guess, isn't it? Yeah, and it's just breaking it down to the community they can understand, and if we can plug and play a lot from other places have done all this, it'd be great, but I know ours is probably a different scenario. I mean, yeah, it's confusing. Like, I live on a bushfire zone in Knockcroft, you're right against trees, like massive, the whole council reserve. It's great, I love it, but it is chilling here, all this sort of stuff, and knowing we'll have the 67 fires wiped out over the outskirts, Summer Hill, Forest Road, etc. We still are planting trees though with, in those areas with council and that, with bushcare people, and that's not a shot at the excellent work they do. I'm just saying, and I too, as I said earlier at one of the meetings tonight, I'm planting trees on my hand up there. It's education. I guess the main thing is this public education, I guess is what I want to distill it to in the first instance, isn't it? And if the public can get a bit of a, I can get that now, instead of just a levy or all this stuff or whatever it is, all good work, it may make the journey a bit better. And with your incredible outreach from magazine and all that, it's an excellent arm. It's not coming from another council sort of email-y sort of thing and all that. It's just about education, I think.
And I really think there's a power in having a joint-up approach with the community. It's not just council, it's not just your insurer, it's not just state governments, it's not just the fire service. It's you're all there together saying the same thing. I think it can be quite powerful.
It's also the respect, like you've got a lot of RACTs well respected, other organisations that are well respected as well, that are, one of the best brands in Tasmania is Landcare.
Yeah.
I'd hate to bang on.
We've got it down. We've got it. We will talk to them.
Yeah, no, it's repetition. Yeah.
She's noted it repeatedly.
Yeah. I'll send you an email.
Can you remind us, Sean?
Yeah, I'll send you an
thanks.
Because I can give you some examples of how millions of dollars have been blown.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Do you want my number? I'm serious.
No, we hear you.
That's the first phone call she's making to her. Thank you.
Well, that'll be the council side of the partnership.
We've still got a couple left, haven't we?
We have.
Yeah, we've got questions, haven't we?
Yes, and questions without
I'll
numbers.
move the receipt with the questions if that's needed.
Yeah, we need to do that.
Aye.
Responses, all those in favour?
Aye.
Moved by Councillor Lohberger. And the last item is, anyone got any questions? And there's nothing in the closed. No questions? We don't have questions at 3 minutes past 7. Okay, thanks for coming.